All right, back with Kamish talking some college football playoff stuff to start. Um, Crazy top four reveal. That was must watch TV. I was locked into that. I was sitting on my couch, uh, eagerly awaiting the pitchforks and um, torches that were outside of wherever the college football playoff committee was holding their meeting beforehand, probably in a bomb shelter.
Those guys are. Yeah, you're right.
Seriously. Um, but a crazy top four, very polarizing, the reactions from it. Of course, we all know by now Florida State left out of the top four. They were ranked fifth by the committee. Alabama got the edge over them in the fourth spot. Then we also had Texas in the three, Washington in the two, and Michigan had the first place spot. What was your immediate reaction? You and I were texting a lot leading up to that, and we even did a short pod about it briefly last week. So we both sort of expected the result, but still, when it actually happened, what was your immediate gut feeling?
Immediate gut feeling was that the committee actually got it right. I thought that Alabama was definitely the more deserving team over Florida State. That was obviously the controversial spot that was up for grabs. I thought, you beat Georgia, the number one or former number one team in the country. I didn't really think that there was going to be any controversy when it came to if Alabama would be in or not. My secondary reaction was that what I have been saying now for a couple of weeks when we're talking college football on this podcast was actually wrong. I was saying that the committee was going to take, if it came down to it between Bama and Texas, they would take Bama over Texas. That clearly seems to have not been the case just because Texas is seated higher than Alabama here. So those are the first two things that jumped off the plate to me. I still think Texas and Bama should be flip-flopped despite the head-to-head. I know I'm a little bit out there with that take, but by and large, I know there are a lot of people with the pitchforks about Florida State. I think that people are just looking to get up in arms about something. I mean, no matter what four teams were selected for this, somebody was going to have a problem with it and voice their opinion. But I think in that sense, in keeping Florida State out, the committee got it right.
Did this feel like a live viewing of the ACC's funeral to you in some ways? Because if you were scrolling through Twitter afterwards, that's what people were saying. I so many schools that weren't even relevant as far as the top four goes were up in arms about Florida State being left out. ACC schools, I mean.
It's tough for me to say like this was the ACC's funeral when we see what's going on across the country in the Pac-12 and that conference has literally been dissipated. I mean, all it has now is Oregon State and Washington State with this whole realignment. I mean, that's the conference that's actually being laid down in a casket, but for different reasons. The ACC has fallen on a little bit of tough times when it comes to the football sense now that Clemson has kind of fallen from that top level of power that they were at when Trevor Lawrence was there and they were competing with Alabama every year. I don't think that this is a funeral for the ACC per se when it comes to football. I think that they just need to breed better talent right now. I think that, their schedules, some of their top teams just need to play a little bit of a tougher schedule when it comes down to it. We'll talk about Florida State's the schedule and how I think it played a factor in a little bit here, but
well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. If Travis is healthy, do you think they've got a good enough resume to get in anyways?
So if Jordan Travis is healthy, I think that so just based on resume alone, I don't think that the Jordan Travis injury played a factor. Where I think that Jordan Travis being healthy could have pushed Florida State in is if they would have beaten down Louisville in the ACC championship game, like by a wider margin. I think if Jordan Travis was healthy, it would have given Florida State the chance to really demolish Louisville, like, something like a 38-10 or some sort of game like that.
Right.
But I think that the fact that game was, what was it, like 13-6 or some real stinker like that gave that was the nail in the coffin for the committee that this
16
was a clunker. 16-6 just because they didn't look dominant. I think that was the final nail in the coffin and what pushed the committee over the edge to say that this is probably not one of the four best teams in the country. I think if Jordan Travis is there, that game probably turns out differently, and it makes the committee's decision much more difficult. I still think that Florida State is not one of the 4 best teams in the country and should not go to the college football playoff, even if Jordan Travis had stayed healthy throughout the year. I mean, they struggled with teams like Miami, took a fourth quarter comeback against Duke. They only beat Boston College by 2 points this year. I mean, they were struggling with subpar ACC teams, even with Jordan Travis. For me, it didn't make a difference, but I think it could have made a difference in that last game against Louisville. And maybe not. That would have swayed some committee members.
Well, the part of the commentary after the rankings were revealed was I saw some folks on Twitter saying that this was basically like a legalization of putting bounties on top players from top teams. And to a certain extent, I mean, when the committee has language in how they rank teams that brings up possible injuries and missing top players, I feel like I'm not saying that's like nobody's going to actually use that strategy, but at the same time, like you kind of have to look at it, and when it's black and white like that, it's a weird situation, man. I've never heard of that happening before in other sports. First of all, we don't really have many other sports like college football where who goes in and who doesn't is based on a vote. The NCAA tournament kind of works like that, but there's more games being played and there's enough qualification processes in place. And there's so many different conferences. They kind of embrace the randomness of it all that it's not quite as big of a deal. You're selecting 68 teams versus 4. So I don't know. I don't see like a Duke or a Kansas or a UCLA or Kentucky even getting snubbed from a tournament just because they're missing their star point guard or whoever. It's weird. That's not a great comparison, but at the same time, like what else do you compare it to?
It's a little bit tough to compare college basketball and college football just because there's more than double the teams, or just about double the teams in Division I college basketball that are fighting for a spot in the NCAA tournament, as opposed to Division I college football. And just the sheer number of teams that make the NCAA tournament is wildly different. The fact that there are more conferences, there are more teams in general, and NCAA leads to wider gaps between conference to conference. But I think like the ACC, there was such a gap this year between the other major conferences. And I thought that there was such a major gap in Florida State's strength of schedule. Florida State, of the teams that were in question, they had, according to PowerRankingsGuru.com, so ranks the strength of schedule based on what the average rank of the team that you played throughout the year. So they'll take the rankings of all the teams that you played and then, average them out, divide them by 12, 13, depending on how many games you played. Florida State graded out as the easiest schedule among the teams fighting for a spot. They were 55th, toughest schedule according to this metric. Michigan 51st, Georgia 45th, Washington 8th, Bama 6th, and Texas 2nd. Like you can't compare the SEC and the ACC right now. I just don't think you can. Like if you put Georgia or Alabama in Florida State's shoes and you put them in their schedule, I think they're running the table and going 13-0 themselves.
Okay, so let me flip this again on you though. Let's say in the Michigan-Ohio State game, JJ McCarthy tears his ACL and he's done, right? Exact same record, real similar strength of schedule. He's not as crucial of a player for them than Travis was, but do you think would the same thing happen, or would Michigan would still probably make it in, right?
I think Michigan would still make it in. I think it'd be a little bit of a tougher argument, but I still think that Michigan's body of work is better than Florida State's too. That's like what I think people are overlooking, where let's take a look at, Michigan. They have a win over Ohio State, who is a top 10 team. They also have a win over Penn State, who's a top 10 team. Florida State's best win is over number 13 LSU. Like I still think that the level of quality of Michigan's best wins this year make their resume better than Florida State. So even if you take out both teams' quarterbacks, that's enough. That's why, like I'm saying, that I don't think that I don't think that Florida State was let out solely or even primarily because Jordan Travis got hurt. I think it played a little bit of a factor, but more so just because I don't think that they were able to look as impressive and dominate teams in the final week or two, like that game against Louisville. I still think Michigan would be in if McCarthy got hurt, per se.
Okay. I kind of feel like this was something the committee might have leaned towards had he been healthy, but they wouldn't have pulled the trigger on it. I think him having the injury gave them enough conviction to say, yes, this is the right answer. We don't have to think twice about it. I don't think there was really much of a discussion. They had them at 5th, but I really think like when Bama beat Georgia, they knew who the 4th team was going to be. I don't think there was any doubt whatsoever. You and I you mentioned earlier that you might have had Georgia in over Texas, possibly, which I think is kind of a wild argument. I mean, we were talking about best wins. Georgia's best win is against Mizzou this year, who's ranked 9th. All the other teams that made the playoffs beat someone that was in that top 8 or higher. So from Oregon, Ohio State, and then you also had Georgia, who lost to Bama, Bama, who lost to Texas, and so on. Well, Texas, who beat Bama, Bama, who beat Georgia, Washington beat Oregon, Michigan beat Ohio State. All those teams are top 7 teams. Georgia didn't have a win like that on their resume. Ultimately, though, for me, with this decision coupled with the transfer portal opening, the timing of it is just like, for college football purists, it was like a Wolverine punch to the stomach. Like 4 blades right here. Like kids are leaving schools for millions of dollars, schools that they get opportunities from, where they're coming to from programs that you've never heard of. You've got guys that are sitting out whole seasons and making money off of communities and colleges, and then leaving for other schools and whatnot. And then you've got Florida State getting snubbed here. It's a TV show, man. College football is a TV show. It's all about making money for the schools and the schools involved in this. And it's sad a little bit. It's the entertainment value. That's just kind of the nature of it, and you can't disagree with it. It's a business, and that's how it has to be in order for it to be fair nowadays. But I feel like there's a better way to go about it. And you can keep adding teams that make the playoffs. You can make it 12 teams. You can make it 16 or 42, 64, whatever. Someone's going to get snubbed still at the end of the day. And like if you look at this situation, if we did have a 12-team playoff, would Liberty have made the playoff? Undefeated team who won their conference championship? No, probably not, because who cares about Liberty? No offense to the people there. I actually have a friend who's on their coaching staff. Shout out Slade Carroll, former baseball teammate of mine. But it's a bigger argument where it's almost like a boys club now, where you have to be in this select group or else you're going to get stiff-armed out of it. And it's a sad state for me for college football, because FSU, they earned their way into it. I don't think we've had this happen before, where a team, it's never happened before, actually, where a Power 5 team won their conference championship, had an unbeaten season, and didn't make it into the playoff. It's a small sample size, but it still means something, even if they came from a weak conference. That's an accomplishment. Especially if you finished it without your starter or your backup quarterback, you had to use your 3rd stringer for it. I know they played Louisville. It's not a great team. It wasn't a great game to watch, but they still did the damn thing, I
mean, like, not every 13-0 is created equal,
but how many 13-0s are there?
But okay, this is the way I look at it. I alluded to it a little bit earlier in the podcast. If Georgia plays Florida State's schedule, if Alabama plays Florida State's schedule, they are going 13-0. There is no doubt in my mind that they are running the table and going 13-0. So those teams Florida State should not be able to benefit from that because they played a weaker schedule. Okay. I mean, the only team that Florida State played that was comparable to a team that you would see in the meat of a Georgia or Alabama schedule was LSU. Now, Georgia didn't play LSU this year, but Bama beat them routinely as well, beat them by 2 touchdowns.
It's their fault that the teams in their conference suck. That's just incentivizing them to leave and join the SEC or the Big Ten. They should. It's their only choice now. It's their only choice. If they want to win
college championships, they should join an SEC because that's going to give them a better chance to do it because that's where the best teams are. But yeah, they shouldn't be punished because the other teams in their conference aren't that good, but they shouldn't be rewarded for it either, you know?
Yeah, I just don't get me wrong. I would have left them out. I wouldn't have put them in the top 4. I'm not saying I would have, and it probably would have been for the same reason, honestly. I don't see this FSU team beating I don't see them beating Georgia, who was ranked below them. I don't see them beating any of the teams that were ranked ahead of them. They probably, I don't know, maybe Ohio State is a good game. Oregon, I think, would beat them, but it's not fair in terms of what you expect from the results of the sport and accomplishing things. And I've seen real actual football because they're in a conference historically that the precedent has been set. You go undefeated in this conference, you win the conference, you get to go to the playoffs over other teams that didn't do that. It's just the simplicity of that. You're leaving them out you're leaving them out whether or not it was because of the quarterback being out or not, which that was a big part of the reason why. You can't
use past history of what the ACC's been in years past to justify making a decision this year.
No, but they've set precedents for other things and used it for selections before, is what I'm saying. This is the first time we've seen them set the precedent of if X happens, if they don't have this guy available, we can take them out because people would rather watch the other guy.
Well, see, I think that's where we're still at a little bit of an impasse here. Is I don't think I still think if Jordan Travis is in there, that they're leaving him out. I don't think their resume is impressive enough with or without him. I do. I don't think they shouldn't be above Georgia. I don't think that they should be above Ohio State. Okay. Ohio State's only loss is to the number 1 team in the country. I don't think that they should be above Oregon personally. Oregon's only 2 losses on the year to the number 2 team in the country. That's my opinion there. I don't feel as strongly that the Jordan Travis injury kept Florida State out. I just don't think that their body of work was enough.
I'm trying to be the voice of the people, Kamish. All right.
That's fair. And a lot of people agree. A lot of people agree with you.
I'm not even saying I'm in that camp. Like I said, my top 4 probably would have been the exact same. I was happy when that was the decision they made. I'm just being more empathetic to the situation of the Seminoles, you know?
I mean, you feel for them because it's given the schedule that they had, they couldn't do anymore. But you mentioned Liberty, Liberty couldn't do anymore. You know, I mean, I'm getting tired of people out there. I know that you're just voicing the opinion of the public, but I'm getting tired of hearing the phrase, well, the results have to matter. Well, they do. I mean, the Alabama result over Georgia had to matter. You know, if you put Florida State in over there, you know, you're saying that Alabama, you can make just as much of an argument. Well, does the SEC championship not matter then that Alabama wins it and they still don't get in? You're going to be able to make that argument no matter who won or lost and who got in. It just boils down to your strength of schedule, who you beat, and that's the committee goes off of that for how strong of a team you are and how deserving you are. No problem leaving Florida State off. I don't know how else to say that, but people are going to make a gripe no matter what, and you can't help that, I guess.
Man, I'm parched. Yeah. So the top 4, we've got our top 4. We have Michigan, Washington, Texas, Bama. 2 great games. I'm excited for both. If you had to pick your title favorite right now, who would you go with? Because I think I know where I'm going to go.
This is tough. actually, the one thing I might have alluded to it earlier that I didn't touch on, that it was a small thing that I had a problem with, but I think Washington should be the number one team in the country. I like Washington's resume more than Michigan's. They've got the 2 wins over Oregon, 2 top 10 teams there. Strength of schedule is much more difficult than Michigan's this year. I think Washington should be the real number one team in the country. I got them winning it all this year. As of right now, you can check back in with me in a week or two. I might change my mind. But who you got?
I'm roll damn tide, man. I can't believe it, but Nick Saban and his voodoo magic, I just can't like bet against it. I can't. And Milroe, he just plays with enough heart to where I like it reminds me sort of Penix, or like the gravitas of how he plays, the feel for the moment, making things happen, putting his team on his back. I mean, the conversation about Bama the first month of the season was, who the hell is this team's quarterback? They don't have one. This guy steps in and he leads them to an SEC championship, like steals their season away from the jaws of death with a fourth and
31.
Tuscaloosa.
4th and 31.
Freaking ridiculous, man. That's one of the most unreal plays I've ever seen, even for an Iron Bowl where we've seen plenty of drama throughout the years. Michigan, Alabama, I think is going to be a phenomenal game. Harbaugh, Saban, the shock and entertainment value of that is going to be through the roof. ESPN, you're going to hear them talking about that and those two guys all week leading up to that game. So much so, I feel like Texas, Washington won't get enough coverage because that's going to be a damn good game too. I think you're on it with Washington. I would have Washington, Bama in the final. But I think the physicality of Bama and their speed in the secondary is going to be able to match up with Washington eventually. And ultimately, I've got the Tide winning it all. I think the FCC keeps the national title in the conference.
Do you think that should be taken into account, by the way, going back to how much different of a team Alabama is now, where they were a shell of themselves early in the year, and when they had their only loss before they had really figured out what they're doing at the quarterback position? I mean, don't you think that the way that they've played lately is much more indicative of who they are? And if you look at just the back half of the season, like there's no discussion to be had. Do you look at it that way as well, or you take that into consideration, even when you're evaluating like Texas per se? Because Texas is yes, they have a win over Alabama, but that's not like the real Alabama that we're going to see on New Year's and potentially in a championship game.
What I would say is that it comes down to coaching and developing players and having an understanding for the strengths and weaknesses of the guys that you feel the most confident and comfortable with, and how you can accentuate those skills or highlight them in order to benefit and maximize the output of your team. That's what Saban's been able to do throughout the course of the year. The growing pains in the first month through Tyler Buckner, who's now going to go play lacrosse at Notre Dame, and Jalen Miller. That was the problem. You had a lacrosse player at quarterback. And that's not a diss to Buckner. He was great actually in Notre Dame before he came to Alabama. The former quarterback for the Irish beat our Gamecocks in the bowl game last year. Tough to bring that up, but
everybody beats us.
No, I don't think you should take that into account or hold it against Bama. I think, or Texas for that matter, because you're still beating Alabama. You're still beating Nick Saban. That's a hell of a coaching win. It's not something you were able to do the year before because Quinn Ewers took that injury. They might have done it had Ewers stayed healthy. Honestly, they were on pace to do so in that game a couple of years back. So I don't take it into much consideration. No, I think it's a testament to what Saban is able to do and the belief that the players there have in him and have in the system there, and the effectiveness of that system. Not to go full like Bill Belichick Patriots fan, but I mean, you can't argue with the success he's had since taking over there. And the conversation that in that month as well was like, I think I remember after Texas lost, how many people were calling for Saban's head in some ways, saying like, this is the beginning of the end.
After Bama lost.
Right. After Bama lost to Texas, people were saying that was the beginning of the end. I don't hear anybody saying that now. So yeah, I'm rolling with Bama, man. I think it's going to be a really exciting playoff. All the games will be great. I think each team has a legit shot. Texas is probably the overall underdog if you had to choose one. But we'll see what happens. You got to play the games.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, these are four pretty equal teams, that are going to get good viewership all around, which I don't think that we could have said if Florida State, not that Florida State doesn't draw a crowd, but I think, if Florida State was in here, we would be talking about a clear drop off between whoever the other three would be and them. So just the fact that we do have Bama in here along with Texas, Washington, Michigan, and not a Florida State, that creates the added excitement because like I really can't tell who the best team is. I can't tell who I think the best squad is, and you seem confident in Bama yourself, but like I don't think that you're like, oh, Bama's a slam dunk. You know what I'm saying?
No.
So
I kind of think whoever wins that game is going to win it, though. To be honest,
that could be. I mean, well, I'm going Washington, but like I could completely understand your thought process on that one, just because Michigan's been dominant all year as well, and Bama's playing their best ball right now, but.
Wild. Man, some good CFP stuff. We got to keep this going closer to those games. I'm excited for whatever national championship preview we may have. Jaden Daniels for Heisman. Yeah,
that's what the betting market seems to suggest. I think he's like minus 1,000 or something crazy.
He had like 50 total touchdowns or something.
Yeah, I don't know his stat line off the top of my head. I think that he benefited from the fact that neither Bo Nix or Michael Penix really dazzled in the Pac-12 championship game. I think that they were both solid. They made a couple plays here or there. And I'm pretty sure each of them threw an interception or responsible for a turnover. Like no one had a Heisman moment, you know what I'm saying? And so neither one of those guys were really able to take hold of the race. And I think Daniels had a slight edge on both of them going into that. So I think he's gonna win this one. Kirk Herbstreit called this on College Game Day like 4 weeks ago. I gotta give him credit. He said it's a slam dunk, no doubt, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So credit to Kirk.
Daniels is pretty incredible to watch, I will say. I think Caleb Williams not even being in the he's not even in the top 4, is he?
No, Marvin Harrison's the other guy that we haven't mentioned yet.
That's pretty crazy.
Finalist.
That makes me wonder if. I know he's already skipping the bowl game, like he's going into the draft, but I wonder if there's a little bit of fire to the smoke that we heard earlier in the year where we heard he might go back and take another year of school if he feels like the fit isn't right.
Oh, I hadn't even heard that. You mean, what do you mean if the fit's not right, where he thinks that he's going to land among
people
NFL
project him to be
teams?
The top pick. Like theoretically, he could look at who the number 1 pick is and say, I don't want to go there, which has actually happened before. Eli Manning did that. Eli Manning did that when he was originally drafted with the Chargers, was able to force a trade to the Giants, which is how the Chargers got Phillip Rivers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. I thought that trade was more facilitated by his dad, Archie, but I can't recall. The best quarterback of that draft class was taken 11th overall that year anyway, Big Ben. So shout out. But I do remember that. But like the difference with that is like Manning was still in that draft class, like he was still drafted. He just got traded immediately. Your situation here that you're talking about is Marvin Harrison just completely going back to school. Caleb Williams. I'm sorry. I thought we were talking about Marvin Harrison. I have heard that about Caleb Williams. It's the power of NIL. Like you were talking about, I mean, these guys are making so much money now, and it's become such a business where they have that ability to do that. I think it's giving them a little bit more power than is, but I don't know. That's why I think it's like okay that the NCAA or the committee might have made a business decision on leaving Florida State out because of viewership, because players are making business decisions to not play in bowl games per se, or, go to the NFL draft, not go to the NFL draft. They're using their brand in college now for their business. So I see it's okay for the NCAA to do that. I don't know. I think that like a guy like Caleb Williams or like another college athlete that might be considering doing the same thing might just be playing with fire. You never know what might happen with injuries the following year. Maybe you just don't have as strong of an output. You fall a little bit in the draft. I think it's a privilege to be drafted by an NFL team, and I don't think it's something to scoff at and take lightly. Not that they're necessarily doing that by going back to school, but it doesn't have the same aura or mystique that it did before NIL.
Well, my only concern really with Caleb, as a concerned Patriots fan who may or may not end up having a number 1 overall pick at the end of the year, fingers crossed, I just keep thinking about that shot of him after, I forget who they were playing. It might have been Oregon, where after the game when they lost, or maybe it was Washington. I think it was the game against Washington after they lost, the shot of him in the stands crying in his mom's arms.
That's not going to go over well in Foxborough. I can assure you that.
No, when we're going like 4-13 next year or something like that, and he has nobody to throw the ball to, nobody to block for him. If he's crying on the sidelines, that's the only thing I'm worried about. Mac was not able to deal with whatever adversity came his way at any point in any game. So whoever we bring in afterwards needs to be better at that. I'll just leave.
You hope this year, though, for Caleb Williams, and we've kind of gone off on a little bit of tangent talking about him, but I mean, he's, one of the top quarterback prospects in recent history. So he's worth it. You hope that a year like this, where Southern Cal had high expectations, maybe even college football playoff expectations, and it didn't turn out that way, and it was a very trying year in terms of the win-loss record for them. You hope that builds character for him and helps prepare him for the next level, because you will not roll through everybody and win every game. You will face tough times, no matter who you are, no matter how talented you are as a quarterback. You will face adversity, and the playing field is never more level than it is in the NFL. So you got to hope that it builds his character in college and preps him for a tough spot, maybe like a New England.
Yeah, if I had my pick, I would. I mean, I would love to get him. Any quarterback would be great right now, but I've said this before. We have so many more holes on our team. It's not going to take one draft class, one off season to fix it. Anyways, moving on to some NFL stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we've exhausted the college topic, even though it is the big topic of the week.
Moving on to some NFL stuff. Let's start with the headliners. San Francisco, Philadelphia. This was the game that everybody was hyping up all week. And it was a rematch of last year's conference championship. A lot of smack talk going on, not just before this game, but really all year leading up to this game. Debo called James Bradberry trash at one point. The Niners showed up in all black. Debo was wearing black Air Forces in warmups. This was a total, I'm the bad boy on the street. I'm the bully. This is my block. You live down the street. You can't hang out here. This was that sort of win for the Niners. They went into the Eagles' house. They bullied them, man. It was low scoring, too, to begin with, but they got on a roll. They scored 6 straight touchdowns. They're 33-1 in games that they lead at halftime under Shanahan, which is a remarkable stat. Basically guarantees a win if they're up at the half. I think that one loss, I'd have to go back and look at it, but that one loss may be in the Super Bowl to Mahomes, if I'm not mistaken. So they're the best team now in the NFC. They're certainly the team to beat. Philly has the 1 seed still, but now they've shown that they can go into that place and not just beat them, but dominate them.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel a little bit vindicated with this one, not to toot my own horn, but one of my hot takes when we did that segment back a couple weeks ago after they knocked off Jacksonville, I said, when San Francisco has all of their weapons, they are the best team in football. And that was coming off. It was actually just a game removed, I think, from their 2-3 game losing streak that they had when they had the little hiccup in the middle of the year. They've got too many weapons to cover, dude. And Brock Purdy is absolutely deserving to be in the MVP discussion. We certainly exhausted that topic last week. It's interesting because I find that when you do too much talking in the NFL, like the Niners did, you create bulletin board material. And I feel like the team that's doing a lot of talking pre-game or preseason, whatever it may be, usually doesn't win. But that's not the case. The Niners backed it up. Debo had a great game, backed up his talk. you heard the San Francisco team last year after they lost the NFC Championship saying, man, if Brock Purdy didn't get hurt, there were holes to expose, and that equals defense. And they did, man. They did. This was the top rushing defense in the NFL, one of them at least. And they rushed for over 100 yards with ease. That's a true identification of how great of a team you are, is when you have a strength and your opposition is equally strong at defending that, and you just say, we're going to be better at you than this. And that's exactly what the Niners did, top to bottom.
It definitely came down to the battle in the trenches. You mentioned San Fran's rushing yards. On the other side, Philly was held in check in the running game the whole time. They had less than 50 rushing yards as a team. First time that's happened in over 4 years. The last time that happened was September 15th, 2019, in a 24-20 loss to the Atlanta Falcons. So you take that into account. It's like I said, San Fran just dominated them. They knew everything that they needed to do in order to have success in that game, and they made it happen. You mentioned the weapons for the Niners. One guy I think that doesn't get enough credit actually is Brandon Ayuk. I feel like he's the guy nobody talks about on that offense, when in reality, he's the guy that is responsible for most of their receiving yards. He actually has 39.54% of their team air yards, which is 11th in the NFL per next gen stats. Really weird statistic, I know, but if you look at the guys ahead of him on that list, they're all like top of the line receivers that you would think of, with the exception of Garrett Wilson, who's second. Just a random other throw in there, but
I think Garrett Wilson, talent wise, is up there with the top receivers in the NFL. He's just in an awful spot. I don't think that's his fault.
That wasn't a knock against Garrett Wilson. That was just kind of mentioning non sequitur. Anyways, the Niners, I don't know when they have everybody healthy. I don't think they're totally unbeatable. I think somebody can beat them. It's just going to be a combination of like execution, having a couple of plays go your way, and finding out a way to be more physical than them across the board.
I said this after the game. I think that the 49ers, and this is bold, I know I told it to you. I think the 49ers, this year's 49ers team, is the best team the NFL's seen since the 2007 Patriots. The way that they dominate teams, I don't think that teams can come within a play or two of them. I mean, look at what they've done. Look at how this was a 23-point game. Beat Jacksonville by 31. They beat the Steelers first week of the season by 20-something. I mean, they destroy good teams. Dallas is another one that they just embarrassed. When they have everybody, I haven't seen a team be able to come within a play or two. The Bengals were one of them, but they don't have Joe Burrow anymore. So I don't know. That's my bold claim. I think that this team is the best team the NFL's seen since the 07 Patriots.
I think that's, you might not be far off. I'd have to go back and look at some other teams from the last handful of years. The Patriots had some teams in their later dynasty that I think were better than that team that almost went unbeaten, that won Super Bowls. Even the Chiefs a few years ago, that 2019 team with Tyreek and with Kelsey was ridiculous. But the argument that you're making, I think they're in the conversation, and it's going to come down to how much success they end up having come January and February. But certainly talent-wise, they're one of the best NFL teams on paper we've ever seen, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to, for that argument to hold up and to tread water, they're going to have to win it all. But even though conveniently enough, the 07 Pats did not win it all, but not to bring back bad memories on that. We'll see. We'll see, dude. We'll see. And it starts with the quarterback, man. That guy's a legit quarterback. I don't think anybody can say otherwise now.
No, Purdy's legit. Let's move on to the Dallas-Seattle game since we're on Purdy. We can segue into Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. This was a confidence boost win for Dallas for me. I think it was the opposite for Seattle. Seattle now has lost I think 4 straight, if I'm not mistaken. No, they've lost 3 straight, but they've lost 4 out of their last 5. Tough sledding for them recently. They also have to play the Niners next week and then the Eagles after that. So there's a very real possibility that they lose 2 more games after this one. For Dak and for the Cowboys, it's their first win against a team with a winning record at the time. Fourth quarter comeback of the season. They're still undefeated at home, which is huge. They are hosting the Eagles next week at home. That's a crucial game for them. DK was doing some unreal shit. He had 3 different touchdowns, sign language in the end zone. He makes me want to learn sign language. Like,
yeah, isn't that crazy? DK takes sign language on the side. Good for him.
Just so that he can trash talk people without getting flagged, by the way. That's the only reason why.
That's awesome. That's dedication right there. I love that.
He found a workaround for the rules for sure. Gino was like, all right. He had 3 touchdowns, which was a season high for him, but he still like barely completed half of his passes. And there were some misses that he had that weren't great. He had some good throws, but Metcalf was ridiculous in this game. He was the big factor for me. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a couple nice catches too, and Charbonnet was good on the ground. But I think Dak should be the front runner for MVP over Purdy at this point. That's my take. He's got more yards, more touchdowns, less weapons to throw to. He's got the best completion percentage above expectation in the league at plus 5.2 per next gen stats. Purdy's is 2.9. That's a pretty big gap. Purdy's like the 5th or 6th ranked by that stat, I believe. So it's not like he's way behind Dak, but the difference is still great. But the Cowboys' next month of scheduling is very difficult. They've got, I know that they have to play the Eagles. They also have to play the Bills, then the Dolphins, then the Lions. So their next 4 games are all against not just playoff teams, but upper echelon playoff teams, with the exception of Buffalo, of course.
Yeah, I agree with you on most of what you said, especially when it comes to Dak Prescott. I do think that he should have a little bit of an edge over Brock Purdy right now. In terms of the MVP, excuse me. And I think the number of weapons there is crucial. I mean, outside of CeeDee Lamb, there's not a huge go-to guy on this offense, whereas Purdy has multiple options. Not to take away from what Brock the Rock has done, because we've talked so highly of him, but that does have to play a factor. I mean, when you do consider the name of the award, most valuable player. Where I disagree with you, I think, is the perception of this game in Dallas's eyes. I didn't see this as a huge confidence building win for them. They still gave up 35 points to Seattle. You know, DeMarre Bland was a guy who's gotten a lot of talk for some of the interceptions that he's been able to force. And I do know he had one in this game, but he got torched by DK in this one. Gino wasn't great in terms of completion percentage, but this was a quarterback who's struggling. He comes in here, helps generate 35 points of offense in your home building, 3 touchdowns. Like, I think Dallas is walking away with a little bit of a sour taste after this one, in my opinion, because they haven't beaten, or at least I don't think that they had beaten any team with a winning record coming into this one. And now I guess technically, I don't know how you look at that. Technically they did, because Seattle was 6-5 coming into this one, but now they're only 6-6. Like, Dallas is still, I think some people are kind of saying like they're still kind of the Miami of the NFC, where like how they're crushing everybody that they should, but how good are they really? And I think internally after this game, seeing how this played out, I think that notion is probably still hovering around the Cowboys locker room.
Well, I was reading the post-game quotes, and Prescott talked about how important it felt, just like guys making plays, being down at halftime and coming back and making the win happen against a Seattle team that were playing their tails off. They definitely were treating this like a playoff game. The Seahawks were, I mean, with you could tell the importance of it. They weren't unaware of the reality of their situation, which is they need to win some games down the stretch here. But I think to your point also, DeMarre Bland is he's like a do or die. He's like a classic do or die cornerback.
They always have that guy.
Yeah, and he's
Him
great.
or Trayvon, yeah.
It's ridiculous. He's great when he's making plays, but it's also not every day that you're matched up against a guy as physical as DK who can burn you like that. And I mean, I think physicality wise, Tyreek is really the only other player in the league that is more imposing than DK when they're at their best in terms of using their athleticism to their benefit, if that makes sense.
I don't really follow when you're saying physicality. Like Tyreek's not a physical receiver. The guy that
No,
came
but
to
he's
mind,
I mean like his speed though. Like he has speed. DK has close to that speed, but also he's like 6'5" and is crazy strong.
yeah, the guy that came to mind, like that's comparable to DK that they will have to deal with, in fact, this upcoming week is AJ Brown. Like that's a similar type of, that's the first guy I thought of. Similar type of receiver, big, strong, muscular, can go up and get it and can outrun you. Tyreek, I get what you're saying about how imposing his speed is, but I think he's just like, that's an apples and oranges argument in terms of like comparing what style of receiver they are.
Right. It's not a direct, it's not a great direct comparison, but anyways, yeah, man, I don't know. I think the Cowboys, if Dak is playing like this, they can compete with anybody. Even in that game against Philly, in Philly, they were a couple plays away from getting that win. I think they're right there with some of the better teams in the league, but they are not as well-rounded of a team. Like they are going to have to kind of rely on whether or not Dak can sling it like he is. If that's not there, I mean, Tony Pollard isn't lighting the world on fire this year. You're not going to be able to rely on the running game. So it's a little bit of both. I think they're gonna be able to beat most of the teams in the NFC, but San Fran, that matchup would worry me. Philly, I feel like they will beat in Dallas. If that was a neutral site game, I don't know how it would go, but I could see them splitting that matchup with a win this week. But ultimately, it's the Niners or bust, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dak is as confident as he ever has been. I mean, he's playing the best football of his career, and so I'm not too surprised that his post game comments came off as like uber confident.
That's the thing that I'm kind of hinging on is like when you see quarterbacks reach a new peak like this, typically there's success that comes with it. Like it's usually you get those hand in hand.
Yeah. I can follow that argument because you have the quarterback playing at his most confident level. Therefore, the team will go with the quarterback. I can follow that. I'm glad you brought up Tony Pollard though, because I think that's huge. I mean, you look at, he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. He's never really gotten going this year. I mean, Rico Dowdle's provided a little bit of a 1-2 punch, but like their running game definitely hasn't been as strong this year as in years past. But I guess Dak has stepped up, I guess he's taken on the burden of needing to be a larger part of the offense.
Big time. Moving on to Packers Chiefs real quick on this game. Crazy finish at the end. Packers are now 16-0 in December under Matt LaFleur. They have at least 3 winnable games coming up next. Looking at their schedule, they're in the 7th seed right now in the NFC. Their remaining games in December are at the New York Giants, the New York Football Giants, I should say, home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then on the road for the Carolina Panthers, and then a divisional matchup in Minnesota. So, Jordan Love, man, he is looking like a fledgling, not fully evolved version of Aaron Rodgers at times with some of these throws, man, like off balance, off schedule, tight windows, just having the perfect amount of like touch on the ball and finding a guy in crowded areas. It's really impressive. In some ways, he actually out Mahomes. Like, if you watch the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was crazy. It was really cool. And the Chiefs, another close loss like this. They're 3-3 now in 1 possession games this season, which that's not something you would expect of a Patrick Mahomes led team. You would think they would have the advantage in one possession games, but right now it's very 50-50. So his supporting cast really worries me. Rashee Rice has come on a little bit of late, but I don't know, man. They've got to play the Bills next week in Buffalo. That's a must-win game for the Bills. You know, Josh Allen and that offense is going to be firing on all cylinders. I'm really interested to see if the Chiefs are going to be able to go punch for punch with them in that game. Whereas the Packers now, you and I were kind of on it last week, looking like they might be a playoff team. They are one as it stands right now. If the season ended today, they'd be in that 7th spot. So go Pack, go, I guess.
Yeah, dude. I actually think last podcast was one of the rare ones where we were on it, man. I don't think we jinxed anybody really. We did have the Packers sneaking in there. One thing that I forgot to mention last week that I want to take the opportunity to bring up now is the Packers are the youngest team in football. And they've got a young supporting cast around Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, who's come on in a big way the past couple of weeks. And obviously Jordan Love's not a rookie, but this is his first year as an NFL starter. And they're getting better throughout the season. So, that can be very, very scary as we head potentially towards playoff time and as you head into the future of Jordan Love's career. I think something should be said for that, where they've kind of weathered an early storm and they've come out of it, which is crucial. I mean, that is so valuable for a young team to already kind of have that experience. I think Christian Watson is starting to unlock new levels of this offense. I mean, he's dealt with injuries this year, dealt with some injuries last year as well. But, you saw once he got healthy at the end of last year, he was Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy. I think that we're seeing that with him and Jordan Love again this year. I give Matt LaFleur a lot of credit, a guy that you were willing to fire just a couple weeks ago. Give him a lot of credit for helping to turn the season around. Personally, did not watch the game. I heard there were some controversial calls, as there are anytime you have a Kansas City Chiefs game, but Packers are starting to impress. I think people are starting to turn their heads at the team and about Jordan Love starting to be the real deal.
No, there were some interesting things that happened at the end of that game. Isaiah Pacheco got ejected for throwing a punch, and then a few plays later, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was like almost strangled trying to make a catch down the field, and there was just no flags thrown. Would have been a total game-changing play, like extremely blatant pass interference. Arm went over his and definitely impeded his ability to catch the ball. No flag. I don't root for Kansas City Chiefs success.
Anyway.
Yeah, probably.
Probably
wouldn't have mattered.
Oh, man.
Oh, poor Chiefs, man. The poor Chiefs.
Oh, poor Chiefs. Come on. They're defending Super Bowl champions. Poor Chiefs.
I don't. Exactly. I can't bet against them because they've got Pat Mahomes, but there's a lot of chinks in the armor. And it feels like every week we're getting some more chinks in the armor. And I don't know, man. The Chiefs are real shaky. I feel like they're still going to be in that like final 4 of teams. If they're not in a conference championship game, I'd be shocked, just because I don't think we've had one that Mahomes wasn't in a while, probably since he took over.
Every year since he's taken over.
Yeah. So that's the standard. I mean, who else is going to step up? Like, is Miami or Baltimore going to best them, or your Steelers, or
everybody else is hurt. All the other quarterbacks seem to be hurt right now. Yeah, the AFC's thin. So,
speaking of hurt quarterbacks, Jacksonville Cincy. Did you watch any of that game?
I've seen the highlights. It's a game that I wasn't really watching in protest because I was just about knocked out in fantasy. But I do know our boy Jake Browning slung that ball around the field. He looked great, man. He put up a Joe Burrow stat line.
He was incredible. Led the Jaguars to a win. It helped that Trevor Lawrence left that game hurt, and CJ Beathard had to step in. It looks like Beathard's going to be the starter this coming week too for Jacksonville against the Browns. 2 playoff teams in that game, so definitely some implications with that. Or 2 playoff hopeful teams. They're teams in playoff standings right now. If Lawrence isn't out there, I don't think the Jags stand a chance. Beathard's record and stat line as a starter is not pretty. regardless of what his supporting cast is, that could be an ugly game with that Browns defense. But Browns defense hasn't been looking quite as solid as of late. So we'll see. But yeah, even the Bengals with Browning stepping up a little bit look like they could be slightly frisky. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I did kind of think that the bigger story was actually on the Cincinnati side of things, even though Jacksonville is the one that had their starting quarterback go down on this one. It's unrealistic for us to think that Jake Browning's going to go out there and put up a 32 for 37 stat line and throw for over 350 yards every week. I mean, it just won't happen. But if he's looking more like the version that he did on Monday night, Cincinnati can win some games. I mean, you still saw they've got a good supporting cast around them. T. Higgins is back from injury. Joe Mixon looked good. Jamar Chase was his typical self. Had a huge night with over 120 yards and a touchdown. Cincinnati's in the hunt in the playoffs just because the AFC is so muddled down around the wild card picture. I think that's a little bit of a bigger story in some ways because I think we had just written Cincinnati off entirely a week or two ago after they had looked so bad, against the Steelers. If Brown is going to deliver that performance, let me say this. That's the best backup performance I have seen from maybe excluding one or two things that Minshew's done, who I know we'll talk about in a little
bit. Or Dobbs. Don't forget Dobbs.
But Dobbs is on the NFC. I'm like comparing him to, the other teams that are dealing with backup quarterbacks now in the AFC that they'll be battling with in that wild card picture. Like a Cleveland. I haven't seen any of the slew of Cleveland backup quarterbacks do something like that. And in the little bits that we've seen Mitch Trubisky this year in Pittsburgh, we haven't seen that. So
Flacco looked pretty okay. He wasn't terrible in that game.
Respectable, but he still had, I think, only 250 yards, or still 100 yards less.
Yeah, he fell off at the end of the fourth quarter of that game. Once he threw that pick, it just got worse and worse.
He was admittedly coming off the couch too, that there's something to be said. Like the guy hasn't played all year.
Impressive for coming off the couch though.
Yeah.
Impressive. They speaking of that game, the Rams now have won 3 straight. And they're back at 500.
Another podcast call from last week. Those were our two teams that we were putting in the NFC playoff picture.
Fifth and Long is on a hot streak. Don't tail us this week, boys.
Don't get used to it.
Yeah, right. But no, I mean, it was 20-19 the score of that game with like half a quarter left to play in regulation. And then Flacco kind of forced that interception. He was just trying to get rid of it, and he ended up throwing it into like quintuple coverage and somebody came down with it. And then after they gave up a touchdown, they had a fumble, and then they gave up another touchdown, and then they had a safety that they gave up. So it was just like one bad play after another, and they couldn't stop it. I'll give them credit for being in that game to that point. And I think where they were in that situation and how the game ended is kind of a testament to where they are as a team right now, where they're good enough to where they're going to be able to compete against good teams. But again, going back to the quarterback thing, they don't have anybody they can rely on, and they don't really have someone that they don't have a quarterback right now that is going to make more plays that benefits them versus plays that hurt them, even with Flacco. And maybe he has a little bit more of a rapport with Elijah Moore next week. He had 11 targets, only had like 4 catches. I think Amari Cooper could be out next week. So I don't know.
He took a big hit, didn't he? In the concussion or something like that.
He's in the concussion protocol. He's in the concussion protocol. But the Browns play the Jags next week. That's their possible get right game if Lawrence is out, which he probably will be. So that could be a win for Cleveland. It looks like it should be, at least.
Yeah, the Jags have struggled mightily against the pass. As we just talked about a minute or two ago with Jake Browning, throws 350 yards. So Joe Flacco could certainly go out there next week and, maybe throw 300 plus, help kind of facilitate some offensive life for that team. I do agree that their defense is good enough to at least keep them hanging around. But I don't want to make this game solely about the Browns. I want to talk about this Rams team. They're putting up back-to-back games of 30 points. They've looked really, really good the past couple of weeks. I finally feel like that team is healthy. Cooper Kupp may not still be at his peak level, Puka Nacua has over 100 yards and a touchdown. Kyren Williams is all the way back from injury. Stafford is shaking off any cobwebs or injuries he had earlier in the year. It's a dangerous looking team if they're going to play like they have the past couple of weeks. I think that's a well-rounded team. That's a team that played solid defense today. Stafford, if he can get in the playoffs with McVay, a good head coach, a quarterback that's made a run before, has that playoff experience, I don't see a reason why, they couldn't maybe make another little run again. I think the top NFC is a little top heavy, but this is a team I think that could win a game or two come playoff time. I think that they've proven that the past couple of weeks.
To your point, Kupp to me still doesn't look healthy, really. I feel like he's still trying to get back to full strength. I don't know if we'll see that from him this year, but luckily he's got Puka Nacua lining up on the other side of him, somewhere else on that line of scrimmage, most plays. And Kyren Williams is incredible, an incredible running back. One Kyren Williams is also on Sean McVay's fantasy team, so there's some incentive for Sean to get him in opportunistic situations. You made a note here, and it's interesting. I want to touch on it a little bit. You said, how far off is Matthew Stafford from the Hall of Fame? 11th all-time in passing yards, 11th in passing touchdowns, has a Super Bowl ring. I don't think he's that far off. I think there's a great argument there. You also throw in he had that record-setting season with Cooper Kupp. That's also in the NFL history books and would play a role in his possible selection, perhaps. This is a ways down the road. He's probably got, it's tough to say how many healthy years left he has ahead of him because he has had a banged up career. But I would say he's right there on the fringe. I think he probably deserves it. A lot of people would say he does. I believe he still has a record below 500 as a starting quarterback in the NFL. That would be my one knock on him. Now, he played on some really bad teams in Detroit, and it was not his fault that the team surrounding him was so garbage, but it was. He also got Detroit to the brink of the playoffs a couple times as well. So I would say he's got a good argument for the Hall of Fame. I wouldn't be. He's not a unanimous Hall of Famer, but I think he could be. Sure.
Yeah, I don't have him in yet. He's absolutely in the discussion. Another Super Bowl would seal the deal. I have a tough time believing that this Rams team is going to be able to win another one with him because he is 35. He's had some injury problems the past couple of years. I'm not saying it's out of the question. I just think it's unlikely. I think the career record is a knock on him. You made a good point about that. And I think that there are some people who are going to be making this decision that are going to credit some of his steps, especially early in his career, to the wide receiver that he was throwing to. Calvin Johnson, one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game.
Pretty good guy to throw footballs
he shouldn't be,
to.
Yeah, not a bad guy to throw footballs to. I mean, I hate to punish a guy because, he had such a talented guy like that, but I think that might play a factor as well. He's right on the cusp there. He's with some other guys. He's right around Eli Manning territory, I think, with passing yards and passing touchdowns. Matt Ryan's another guy in that territory as well, where I don't really think Eli, if Eli gets in, it's really just because he beat Tom Brady twice in the Super Bowl.
He'll get in.
Matt Ryan's.
He'll get in, much to my chagrin.
You think so?
Eli will definitely get in. Yeah, you beat the GOAT twice in the
I'm
biggest
not
game.
quite as confident.
I'm
not quite as confident as you are.
I hate it, but you got to. Giants fans would crucify me if I disagreed.
Well, yeah, and we have a lot of Giants fans listeners, but
we'll
see.
Don't I know it?
We'll see. It's an interesting topic of discussion here. I think if he can have maybe one or two more deep playoff runs where he's, a crucial reason why they're winning, Stafford, that is, now going back to talking about him, that might be enough. It's really interesting. I think he's really one of those fringe guys. I think it was an interesting topic of discussion there.
back to the Rams. They've got a matchup against the Ravens this week. You mentioned the Rams have back-to-back games with 30 points. The Ravens have allowed 30 points in a game once all season. They've allowed 20 points in a game 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 times this season. So difficult defense to score against. And I believe they are playing them in Baltimore. They are. So tough game ahead for the Rams. They are just outside of a playoff spot. They're in the 8th seed right now in the NFC. Detroit, New Orleans. This was a weird, kind of interesting game. It was over real early. Detroit made it 21-0, which was a franchise record for points in an opening quarter for the Lions. It wasn't all Derek Carr's fault, but he didn't exactly help. I will say his interception was not his fault whatsoever. Went right through the hands of Juwan Jennings, I think his name is, the tight end, backup tight end, Juwan Johnson.
Juwan Jennings is a receiver for the Niners.
Right? Former receiver for the Niners.
No, current. Juwan Jennings still plays for him.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But Carr also had a ton of missed throws in that first quarter. I think he only had like 2 completed passes for like 12 yards or something, and a lot of misses. And then when the Saints actually started getting back into the game, he had the one passing touchdown inside the 15, but that was the only passing play they called in the red zone, that whole sequence. All the other 8 plays they called were all run plays. Now Carr did complete 15 straight passes at one point. Good job. Sick, dude.
I know that must be difficult for you to give Derek Carr any sort of praise.
Well, I will say, like, when Jameis came in, he had one typical like tipped pass that ended up in Chris Olave's hands for a big gain, but they really could have used Carr in that last drive, at least to get them into a situation where they could have threatened, because with Jameis under the helm, I just don't believe they can do that. Now, if Carr misses next week, which there's a chance he does because he left the game with concussion, back, and shoulder issues, where that's like the holy trinity of quarterback injuries to me. If you have all 3 of those at the same time, it's not good. It's not good. So I would rather, I'm not just saying this because he's on my fantasy team, but if I was leading the Saints offense, I would rather just have Taysom Hill out there for some gadget plays, gadget offense, ride him and Kamara and your blockers and try to make something happen. But ultimately, the Saints ended up losing this game because turnovers. They had 2 bonehead turnovers in the game, a bad fumble, as well as that touchdown or interception, I should say. If they don't have those, they probably win. But credit to the Lions, man. Best start since 1962 when they went 10-2. They're 9-3 right now. Probably going to win their division. Still a little shaky. They have some holes. Only 1 touchdown of theirs in this game started inside their own 45-yard line. So they were definitely benefited in the field position game and by New Orleans struggles holding on to the ball. But I still like the Lions. I feel like we do the same thing every week where we question their validity and rag on them when they do poorly, but praise them when they do well. They definitely could have lost this game for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit more of the ragging here. To me, good teams put lesser teams away when they have the opportunity to do so. You mentioned that Detroit gets out to a 21-0 lead in this one, and they don't put them away. The Saints have a chance to maybe potentially win this game late. That's not the sign of an elite team. That's a sign of maybe like a good team, but not a great team, which is kind of what I've been saying about Detroit the whole year. I was a little bit discouraged, certainly, as a fantasy manager, that they didn't get Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit more involved in this game. Even though Sam Laporta stepped up in a big way he's really stepped up as a second pass catching option. Very talented rookie tight end out of Iowa, went over 100 yards in this one. And then my other qualm with Detroit is like, I don't know why the carry split went 18 to Montgomery and 8 to Jahmyr Gibbs. That doesn't make sense to me, especially when Gibbs averaged 7.5 yards per carry to Montgomery's 3. But
it's because of where they had the football. When they're on the other side of the 50, they like to put the ball in Montgomery's hands, whereas when they're on their own side, they're giving it to Gibbs and trying to use him to switch the field.
I don't think it should matter. I mean, I get what you're saying. Maybe some more red zone opportunities. Montgomery's a little bit of a bigger back, but I just think Gibbs is more talented all around, faster, quicker, more elusive. Like,
I'm with you.
The split, let me say this. I get, you want to preserve a guy like that. He's a rookie. You don't want to overload him, especially in his first year. The split should at least be closer to 50-50. It shouldn't be 18-8,
Like 60-40 at least.
Yeah, I mean, like I think Gibbs should actually have a little bit more of the carries, but like, yeah, you're right. Like make it more like 14-10 or 14-12 or something like that.
Right. Colts Titans. This was an electric game to watch. Super fun. It was on meth at times. Like just some absolutely ridiculous stuff was going on. There was a sequence where there was a Indy blocked a punt for a touchdown and then tried to go for 2, but threw a pick 6 and then forced a 3 and out and blocked a punt again. It was like bingo card after bingo card after bingo card getting checked. Hopkins and Henry were actually like pretty good for the Titans. There was one play where Will Levis, it looked in the moment like he threw a pick, but it was actually a forward fumble where he lost a fumble on a forward pass, or what was he was hoping to pass it. You know what I'm saying. There was a play where Will Levis lost a fumble, went and tackled the defender who recovered it, forced a fumble on that tackle, and then recovered the fumble that he just forced. He's not an awesome quarterback. He's probably the guy in Tennessee for now, but that's a football play right there. I don't think I've ever heard of a quarterback doing that in an NFL game before. That was ridiculous. Lots of trick plays. Neither team's really like good. I think without Jonathan Taylor, the Colts ceiling is heavily limited. But Gardner Minshew, man, I got a nickname for him. I call him the Sheriff now because when it's time to go home, he makes sure everybody packs it up and leaves. That game-winning touchdown drive, I think they did it in 5 plays. He had that huge walk-off touchdown to Alec Pierce. Or was it Pittman? Was it Pittman? No,
he threw the huge touchdown to Pierce was earlier in the game. The walk-off was
Pittman.
It was like around, it was in the red zone somewhere. It was like a 10 or 12 yard throw to Pittman, but a seed nonetheless.
He had a big throw to Pierce, I think just before that to put them in range. Yeah, man, they're a team that will beat bad teams, but when they have to play like a Miami, I don't see them doing well. They did beat Baltimore earlier in the year, so I'll give them credit for that. But I don't know. I don't know how to feel about them. They're a sneaky team to me.
Well, I don't know how I feel about the Colts and their outlook for the rest of the season, but I feel pretty confident in saying Gardner Minshew is definitely one of the best 30 quarterbacks in the NFL. And I actually say that even when everybody's healthy. Now, with all the injuries that we're seeing, I think he's even more like with the plethora or
I would say he's top 20 when everybody's healthy.
Yeah, like what's the word I'm looking for here? With the slew of quarterbacks that we're dealt with now after all the injuries, yeah, I definitely would put him into the top 20. So the Colts,
even when everybody's healthy, I might have him in the top 20, to be honest.
Nah, I don't know if I could go that far. Like he still does make some boneheaded plays here or there. And like the sample size that we've seen him in over the past 2 years still isn't like that crazy big, but he's good. He's solid. I definitely think he should be a starter in the league. But where I was going with this is that the Colts have a quarterback right now, kind of similar to what I was saying about Jake Browning, where it's interesting that Jake Browning has looked better than like any of the Steelers backups or any of the Browns backups. Like Minshew has looked better than Browning. Well, maybe not better than Browning's performance against Jacksonville, but Minshew as a whole, his baseline is better than any of the other backup quarterbacks that we've seen in the AFC. And that bodes well. The guy that plays with confidence, over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. So the Taylor injury hurts, but I mean, the Colts have their guy for this year. Like that's definitely a guy I know that the rest of their team is able. I'm sure that they are comfortable with rallying around him for this year. You know, where I don't know if that's going to be the case in Pittsburgh behind Mitch Trubisky. I don't know if that's the case per se with Cleveland and Flacco or Jacksonville and Beathard.
Let's talk about your Steelers since you mentioned that game. 24-10 win for the Arizona Cardinals in that game. A really weirdly paced game. We had a 30-minute halftime essentially because of weather. Then we had another delay in the middle of the third quarter. It kind of seemed like the Steelers came in flat, like there wasn't really any energy. And then with all the breaks and with Pickett getting hurt and everything, it just seemed like they were sleepwalking through the game, like they didn't want to be there or something. And yeah, it was shitty weather and they weren't playing a great team, but you're in a playoff race in a really close division. Like this is a game you need to find a way to win. I'll give James Conner and I'll give Kyler credit. This was the James Conner revenge game in some ways. 20 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns in his return to Pittsburgh. Huge game for him. But now the Steelers, they've got a game against the Pats on Thursday night. You got to win that game. There's no way you can lose to that team. Belichick will find a way for you guys to win that game. I promise you. I don't know if you've seen the injury report for that game, but like all of our receivers are on it. We might walk into that game with nothing but running backs and tight ends. I'm dead serious.
And Ramondre Stevenson likely out, I heard, for you guys as well.
Yep, he is. That's official. He's out.
Yeah, I got plenty to say about the Steelers. You hit the nail on the head that they were not ready to play this game. In fact, there have been 2 guys that I know of that were quoted to have said that they took the Cardinals lightly during the week of practice. Both Jaylen Warren and Deontay Johnson said that. And the rain delays honestly should really have benefited the Steelers. One, the weather should benefit the team that plays outdoors anyway. Cardinals are an indoor team. And you're right, the Steelers have a lot more to play for right now. They're in the thick of a playoff race. And Arizona is a team where most of their guys have probably packed it in. They're 2-10 coming into this year. The consistent rain delays should just make a team like Arizona want to get on the flight home that much faster and just, run this game out and finish things off. But it was the opposite. It was the Steelers that seemed like they wanted to get out of there and not the Cardinals. To me, you know what? A lot of people praise him, and that's fine. And I'm not just going to sit here and say, fire the guy, even though that might be how I feel inside. But this is a coaching loss. This loss falls on Mike Tomlin first and foremost. This team wasn't ready to play a lesser opponent. I know that they had the Pickett injury, but they only generated 3 points of offense before Pickett got hurt anyway. This team wasn't ready to play. They now have 2 of their past 3 games. They have losses to the combination of a third string Dorian Thompson-Robinson and the 2-10 Cardinals. You can make an argument that this team, given the schedule that they have, should really be 9-3, not 7-5, and they could be fighting for a number 1 overall seed in a division. As it stands now, they're just going to be fighting for their playoff lives. I personally believe, I think Tomlin should be coaching for his job the remainder of the season. If we can't make the playoffs with how easy the stretch has been and will be in the back half of the season, I think that's reprehensible. I think it's reprehensible. But I know that a lot of people don't feel that way.
It depends on how many games you've got Trubisky for. Healthy, at least. Now, this is at least the second or third game that he's been affected by injury with. I think it's the second
game. This is the second game Trubisky has come in. This upcoming game against New England will be the first one that he actually
both of those games were losses, correct?
Yes, but I think that both games are going to be losses either way, personally. Like, I don't think that there's a huge difference between Pickett and Trubisky. I think that Pickett's a little bit better. Trubisky takes more shots.
Yes, he definitely does.
I don't think that there's like much more than a marginal gap between the 2.
Damn, shots fired. The Kenny Pickett crowd will not be happy about that.
Well, I don't know if Kenny Pickett doesn't have a very strong backing right now in Pittsburgh.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's not like he's been like an elite pocket passer or anything even close, to be honest. But I mean, if I look at the game, you had goal line whiff on a 4th and 1 to Najee Harris where he
That
gets
was bad.
stuffed. Then you had a Trubisky fumble that immediately led to a Cardinals touchdown. That's a 14-point swing there, which is the score differential. And then you also had a missed field goal by Boswell, who I feel like hardly ever misses. I think coaching does play a role into it. Like, they definitely took the team light, and I sensed that. But Tomlin's, I know how you feel about him. You and I have done this a bunch of times. Tomlin's a good coach, man. He would have most teams in the National Football League as a competitive team, I think. Like, with the exception of maybe like my Patriots, but they're just destined to fail. I think pretty much if the Steelers got rid of him, I think almost any other organization in the National Football League would be happy to scoop him right up.
Well, I think that he would get scooped up pretty easily. I don't necessarily agree with the notion that he would have any other team, competitive. I think that there are some bad teams out there that I don't know if he'd be able to do that much with. I mean, keep in mind, he's got 3-4 prospective Hall of Famers on defense. When you look at Patrick Peterson, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, and TJ Watt, and that defense is still getting gashed. That's the other thing that I didn't mention, man. They gave up a 99-yard touchdown drive after they got stuffed. Like that to the Cardinals. I know that they're better with Kyler Murray now. Like, I know that they're not quite the doormat that they were. You can't be giving up a 99-yard touchdown drive to them. This defense isn't forcing turnovers anymore. And schematically, like, Trey McBride was burning our linebacking core. They should have switched something up. I thought that they should have had Minkah Fitzpatrick shadow him. I think that you have the safety kind of shadow the tight end when you have an athletic tight end that's going off, and they never really switched that up. They just kept Arizona, kept creating the same mismatch over and over again on that drive. I don't know. I'm certainly as frustrated as I ever have been with the Steelers, and maybe that's influencing some of my comments, or at least the severity of them. But I'm just getting tired of this terrible offense and this, 9-8 slog that they've been through the past couple of years, man. I think it's okay to admit that, look, it's been a really good 17 years and he's done some great things for the organization. They got a Super Bowl, but like, it's okay to admit sometimes that the message runs stale and that sometimes it's time to move on. Like, the Eagles did that with Andy Reid. Worked out. Then Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl there, and they did the same thing. Like, I think sometimes the message runs stale, and I think Tomlin's still living in an NFL where, like, he's trying to win games like he did back when they won Super Bowl 43, 15 years ago. And I don't think it's quite working to the level that it was anymore. That's like the bottom line point I'm trying to make.
I get you. I mean, for one, he doesn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback in his offense right now. That's one thing. That's a big difference. That's a huge difference. He doesn't have multiple like Hall of Fame running backs right now either. I mean, Harris and Warren are both pretty good. I saw that Harris is questionable for this week.
Warren, an injury popped up out of nowhere. I actually don't know.
Like, he's never missed a game in his NFL career either. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. This might be a game where they try to rest some people and see if they can scrap out a win. I'll touch on my Pats real quick, just for the Patriots fans who listen. How dare Brandon Staley run up the score with a second field goal in this game? How dare he? Totally unnecessary. You only needed 3 points for the win. 6 is too much, man. All right. Like, I'm trying to bet a ridiculous alternative over under right now. And you're not helping. So credit to the Chargers for turning a gimme win into one of the worst games of football I've watched all year. Just disgusting. And Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi are like separate but identical piles of dog crap. They are the same. Exact same. Fuck, man.
Whoa, Patrick, you've been cursing and swearing a lot on this show. We're supposed to be family friendly.
I'm trying not to be so buttoned up. It's just been a bad. I can't wait for the draft, man. I'm wearing a Red Sox hat. I'm already ready for baseball season. The Celtics got eliminated in the in-season tournament, which makes me feel like it's June 6 months early. Like, Dude, it's rough right now for Boston fans. Our friends in the
Yeah.
chat are gonna love these last 2 minutes.
Yeah, but you know what the objective is. I mean, you've been saying it now for a while.
Yeah, with the
Where I
number
mean,
one
it's
pick.
it's tank mode, and yeah, get a very high pick. I think you guys are in the 2 spot right now, just
We
because
are.
Carolina keeps losing. But well, which I guess the pick would go to Chicago. But I know it's got to be frustrating to have to watch it week in and week out. But as a third party, objective fan in this situation, I keep telling yourself that, man. You don't have a quarterback right now. Mac is clearly proven he's not the guy, and Zappy. I think that Zappy's probably a backup in this league who I think has been thrust into a situation just because there's no legit starter, obviously, in New England. It's a tough spot. I'll admit, when you can't. It's not even like the Chargers are an elite defense either. They've gotten gashed in some spots this year. We'll see. If you want to bet an alternative total under, bet the under in the Steelers Pats game tomorrow, man. I don't think there's going to be a touchdown scored. That's my prediction. You got Trubisky versus Zappy. I don't think either team finds the end zone. Neither offense finds the end zone. Maybe
Patriots defense has been pretty good too.
Yeah.
Our last couple of games, we've allowed like 6 points, 10 points, and 10 points.
Pretty good.
We've allowed 26 points over 3 games, and we've scored 13 in that span. God. Anyways.
Yeah, I saw that stat where I can't remember the teams off the top of my head, but you're one of maybe like 4 or 5 teams to allow that few points over that stretch, and you're the only one with a losing record. Like everybody else is.
We're the only one that hasn't won a game.
Yeah.
It's horrendous. Like, we're not even trying to score points. Whatever. Some other news and notes. Mike Evans, 10 straight seasons of over 1,000 yards receiving. Is the only player not named Jerry Rice to accomplish that feat. That's kind of a big deal. Jerry Rice, arguably the greatest receiver of all time. Definitely the greatest receiver of all time. Mike Evans, surefire Hall of Famer for sure now with that. And then Chuba Hubbard had another solid outing for the Panthers. Bryce Young didn't even complete half his passes, and some of his misses were like really bad. Now, he was under pressure a ton, and again, they're without a head coach now. It's tough sledding in Carolina, and their wins and losses don't even really matter because they don't even have their top pick. So rough situation there, but shout out Mike Evans, man. I actually used to think he was kind of overrated before Brady got to Tampa Bay. And then I started watching the Bucs a little bit more and got more of appreciation for him. And he's still having success now with Baker there. So yeah, man, Mike Evans, credit to you, brother. Otherwise, the last game I want to touch on, Houston, Denver. Big win for the Texans. Big win for the Texans, especially with Lawrence going down in that Cincinnati-Jacksonville game. Denver really struggled, though. Russ had 3 picks. All of them were in the second half. The Broncos went 0 for 11 on third down. Didn't convert on a single third down the whole game. They didn't have a takeaway on defense either. So that was their recipe for their win streak, was force turnovers, have Russ be efficient, don't give the ball up, move the ball down the field. And they didn't do any of that. CJ Stroud now leads the NFL in passing yards. Their young core it's not as young as the Packers, but I think it's more impressive than the Packers' young core in terms of having like Stroud, Nico Collins, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley Jr. You just lost Tank Dell, which isn't ideal, but then you also have Dalton Schultz there, who's not a bad player either. They're a solid team, man, and I would hate to face them. They've got some more winnable games on their schedule. I think they could be a team that could knock some heads and maybe crush some dreams of some other playoff teams come January.
Massive win for them. We talked about this game. We previewed this game a little bit last week and talked about how crucial it would be in terms of the AFC wild card race. And now this is huge, obviously, because they'll have the tiebreaker over Denver, a team that they could be fighting for a spot with. For me, I think a little bit of a larger story is the Houston defense. You touched on Derek Stingley. I thought he made a phenomenal play on the one interception where I thought Russ had Cortland Sutton up the seam. He had 2 interceptions in this game, right?
Yeah, he had 2 picks in that game.
I was talking about the one where he goes across the middle. He undercuts Cortland Sutton's route, where I thought Sutton had a step up the middle of the field, and I thought Russ was going to be able to hit him for what could have turned into a touchdown if he did, because I didn't think there were any defenders behind. Undercuts the route, makes a phenomenal diving play. Like, keep in mind, that was a cornerback that was taken before Sauce Gardner, a guy that a lot of people are claiming as maybe the best corners in football already. And Stingley went before him. So he's starting to make some splash plays, starting to justify the Texans pick with for him over Gardner a little bit there. Will Anderson, you touched on how young this defense is. I like the way it's playing, man. You hold Denver to 17 points. Their totals have been better over the past few weeks. I think they held Jacksonville to 24 the week before, Arizona to 16. Before that, Arizona, I think that was before Kyler Murray got back, so it's not quite as dazzling. But listen to some of the other point totals that they've held defenses to, or held offenses to. Panthers 15, Saints 13. They held the Steelers to 6, Jags to 17 in the first go around. It's not a phenomenal defense, but it's a defense that is starting to come around and starting to play better. And you supplement that with CJ Stroud's play, starting to become a more complete team. Let's keep in mind, DeMeco Ryans, defensive-minded head coach, was the defensive coordinator in San Francisco. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're starting to see that part of the Texan game start to click. So big for them. The Tank Dell injury hurts, but you know what? I'm not going to try to underplay it, but like, CJ Stroud's been, when Noah Brown's been in there, he's been going off. So like, I think Stroud, it'll just be next man up, and Stroud will find the open guys.
They even had another guy come up in this game, a receiver, Brevin Jordan.
We don't even know his name.
Brevin Jordan.
Doesn't even matter.
3 receptions.
I've never heard of that guy.
Seriously, he had three receptions for 64 yards. Second on the team in targets. Like, Noah Brown didn't even have a catch on the day, but Nico Collins, 9 for 191 and a tutty. Oh my goodness. Like,
boy, has he been good. He has been good this year.
He and Stroud are so fun to watch. They also got John Mechie III involved in this game a little bit, former first-round draft pick. I just feel like there's an abundance of talent on the roster that they have yet to fully unlock. And when they can get everybody playing to the level that they want, I mean, we still have a month left of the season for guys to develop and get better and stuff, young guys at least. So I'm really on the lookout for them, man. They're a solid team. They've got some winnable games ahead. They face the Jets on the road next week, then the Titans. They have another matchup with the Titans. And they also have a battle against the Browns mixed in with final game of the year on the road in Indianapolis. That could decide a playoff spot as well. So keep an eye out for the Texans. Taking a look now at some playoff odds for different teams in the league. Miami, Baltimore, KC, Jacksonville, all pretty much locked in for the betting odds. A lot of places you can't even bet on them to make or miss. Same with Philly, San Fran, and Detroit, as well as Dallas in the NFC side. Everybody else you can pretty much find odds for. If I'm looking at these, the closest right now, either way, looks like it's either Minnesota or Pittsburgh. Those are the 2 teams it seems like Vegas wants you to bet on either way. Either Pittsburgh to make or miss the playoffs, or Minnesota to make or miss, with Minnesota being favored to miss and Pittsburgh being favored to make. You feel like they're on the I feel like I know where you're going to be at with the Steelers, but I feel like they kind of have that right. I still see Pittsburgh making the playoffs. I do see Minnesota missing out.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good line. I'm seeing Pittsburgh at -130 to make, +110 to miss. I think they'll still get in. I think that those odds are pretty reflective of
it's just
my internal feelings. Yeah, because you figure that this week is a win. It should be, better be, against New England. And then they have another game on the schedule against Jake Browning and the Bengals, but that's at home. So you figure those are two pretty good chances, and that gets you to 9 wins. And then it's like, can you just find a win in there against they got Seattle, Baltimore, and I'm blanking on a third team, the Colts. So it's like, if you can just find a win in one of those three, with granted none of those teams are pushovers, but like to just win 1 out of 3, pretty feasible. Like that's a pretty good path. I think minus 130 is a pretty good number. I also think with the Steelers, like I think that they're like if you're just a neutral and objective fan, like you could take them now with these odds and it might go up. Like you might have an opportunity to hedge after they win the New England game, because like the odds will fluctuate a little bit more in favor of them to make. You might have an opportunity to hedge for a couple of bucks here or there. But I would say, yeah, take the Steelers to make. Minnesota, I'd say miss, not really just because of them, but because of how strong a team in their own division has come on, Green Bay, and the fact that they still have to play Green Bay later in the year. So I'd say for that reason, it's not really reflective. Like I think Minnesota's still going to be in it till the end, but I think that with how strong Green Bay's come on and how much better like the Rams look now too, some of the teams behind them have just stepped up in a way that I don't think Minnesota has the last week or two.
Minnesota's last 3 games of the season are Detroit, Green Bay, Detroit. So not exactly ideal. Great in terms of quality entertainment viewing purposes, though. Denver minus 400 to miss kind of seems like a lock to me now after their recent loss this past week. I wouldn't bet that line. It's minus 400, but I would say that's pretty solid. Then you also have the NFC South lines I'm kind of interested in. Tampa Bay at plus 220 to make. I kind of like. I feel like they could beat Atlanta in their game against them this weekend. And then after that, I don't believe they have the tiebreaker, but they do have the tiebreaker over New Orleans. So I think it might be a situation where if they beat Atlanta, they may have the tiebreaker, depending on how much they beat them by. Because Atlanta did win the first version of that matchup 16-13. So I guess it would go down to record in division after that. But yeah, that's the one team that I think could still maybe pull something out of their hat and squeak their way into the playoffs. They face Atlanta, Green Bay, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Carolina. I think the Jacksonville and Green Bay games will be tough, but I could see them winning those other 3 games. The New Orleans game is at home, which counts for something, and we've seen how inconsistent they are. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, we've talked about this division a lot, probably more than we should have throughout the course of this season. And I think the one consistent thing, like we've talked about, it seems to flip-flop week in and week out about who we think is legit, who we think can win this thing. I would say put your money, if you want to place a bet on the NFC South winner, because that's essentially what you're doing if you're taking one of these teams to make the playoffs, because they're not going to get in on the wild card. Take either Tampa Bay or New Orleans, just because you're getting better plus money right now. Just because we've seen this flip-flop so many times, I don't think that there's a point in laying like a minus 215 on Atlanta to win it right now, because I think that this will fluctuate up and down in the standings multiple times over the next few weeks. And Atlanta's 6-6, New Orleans 5-7, Tampa Bay's 5-7. They're all within a game of each other. So, I really don't see why Atlanta's this heavy of a favorite. I would say take plus money with either Tampa or New Orleans, whoever you trust more there.
The other line that's really interesting is that you can get the Rams at plus odds to make the playoffs, plus 145 on that. That for me is now it does kind of hinge on how they do in their game against the Ravens. After that, they play the Commanders, the Saints, the Giants, and the Niners. So what, you think they probably go worst case 2-2 in that stretch, best case 3-1. Maybe the Niners are resting starters that last week and the Rams pick up another win. So I would say if you feel like the Rams are going to beat Baltimore this weekend, that might be a line worth touching too.
You know what the interesting thing though about it is that the Ravens game, the fact that it's out of conference, it's not, it's definitely a game that they can afford to lose because, you know, when you go to the tiebreakers, conference record is what they're going to go to after if a teams have the same record within the same conference. So the fact that the Ravens is an AFC game, the Rams can definitely afford to lose it. I think I would wait because I do see them losing that game. And I would see if the odds get a little bit more favorable, maybe jump up from like a plus 145 to something like a plus 160, 170, something like that, just because I do think it'll be a loss. Now, I would caution our bettors out there that if you do that and they win, like then you're just not like, then they're going to be a favorite to make the playoffs. So you do run that risk, but I would wait and hold off on that Rams bet until after this game with the Ravens, because I think the payout's going to be better, and I really don't think that's a detrimental game to lose just being out of conference.
I on the Ravens side of that, with them being tied with Miami record wise for that top seed, I feel like they're going to take the rest of their games down the stretch very seriously, especially considering their second last of the game of the year is actually against Miami. That game could be a battle for that bye week. I think both teams will take that very seriously. So I don't think Baltimore is going to ease off the gas pedal down the stretch here at all. Not by any means. They're not going to take the Rams lightly. Not with Harbaugh there.
No, definitely not. I mean, home field advantage would play a huge factor in the AFC, especially, I mean, because like, you know, take a team like Miami that you just mentioned. I mean, that's a warm weather team. You have to come up north to play Baltimore and maybe an AFC championship or a divisional round, something like that. That's huge. That's a huge swing. So I agree that it's of huge importance for Baltimore to win every one down the stretch or as many as they can, especially a team that's dealt with some injury concerns to their quarterback in years past. You know, if Lamar does get a little dinged up on some of these runs or these hits that he takes, that bye week could be crucial, massive to get him healed up or anybody else on that team.
All right, bouncing over to some spreads for this week's games. We got some good matchups here. I teased it a little bit a couple of minutes ago. Tampa Bay, Atlanta. In Atlanta right now, the Falcons favored by 1.5. I probably wouldn't bet on this game personally, but if I had to, I might just go straight up Bucs money line.
I'd probably just take the dog, you know, like I can't I'll reiterate with a conference that is proven to basically not have a dominant team and that like we can't draw a clear conclusion who the best team is week in and week out. With the NFC South, I think it's equally as tough for lines makers to make a good line. And I think that if that's the case, like if you just clearly can't identify who you think the better team is, which I certainly can't in this situation, just take whoever the underdog is and whoever plus money would be. Or the smartest thing to do is actually, like you said, just don't bet this game. But if you do, yeah, rip Bucs money line at plus money.
I mean, you could like tease them. You could tease them down a few points, and throw them in there with like the Ravens or some other team.
So it's interesting that you said tease. I mean, we do give some gambling advice and everything like that to our listeners. I am personally extremely anti-tease. I think it's the
Jason Selikov special.
I don't think it's ever worth teasing. Football is the only sport that it's kind of remotely worth it just because games end in specific numbers, you know, with 3s for field goals, 7s for touchdowns, like 10s are there. There are scores that are much more common than the other. And so if you can tease through a number like that, it can make sense sometimes. But I think the tease is not a very profitable betting strategy personally. Like I've always found that whenever I tease, either I would have just won if I had just parlayed those two teams straight up, or I just basically you're just paying extra money, or you're getting a way less of a payout for something that's still a parlay. That's the way I look at it, you know?
Yeah. No, we're on the same page. I was just looking at options.
No, fair enough.
Colts Bengals in Cincinnati, road team favored by 1. So the Colts are favored by a single point. Um, that's tough, man. I feel like the Bengals have a slight edge in this. I mean, the Colts defense hasn't really impressed me at all at any point in any game this year. They just went to overtime against Will Levis. Yeah, I would go Bengals on this side, especially at home.
I'll come down on the Colts side. I would have to check where the money's being bet and how strong of a percentage the public bet is on this one. But I think that this is a good spot to fade the Bengals because I think that you're going to see a lot of public bettors put tickets down on the Bengals going off of what they saw on Monday night and overreact to it. I think that's Vegas will try to influence the line here where they'll get the public to overreact. I think it's like typically a good spot to kind of fade whatever that knee-jerk reaction is, especially in the NFL. I'll take the Colts here. I'll take the Colts on the road to win outright.
Okay. And then we also have Jacksonville, Cleveland. Battle of the backups. Again, probably just stay away from this. Cleveland is favored by 3. CJ Beathard has terrible numbers as a starter. You have to take the Browns, right? Especially in Cleveland.
I'd be taking Cleveland here. Yeah, backup versus backup. Go with the better defense. Cleveland's defense has struggled a little bit the past couple of weeks, but I'm still going to trust that unit.
What about Buffalo, Kansas City? This has some game of the week potential here. Kansas City at home, favored by 1.5. Can the Bills get the job done on the road against the Chiefs?
This has rat vibes.
Yeah, I don't like this.
Something's fishy about this line. I would have pegged this line to be more like 3.5 or something like that. I would have expected the Chiefs to be at least a full field goal favorite. In situations like this, when the line really doesn't make any sense, I like to fade like what my initial reaction is. So like my initial reaction would be, yeah, Kansas City. This seems like an easy line for them to smash, even against a decent team like Buffalo. So I fade my gut in that. So I'll say go Buffalo in that sense, but I don't feel confident in it.
I'm kind of leaning the same way. And you remember the last time we talked about the Bills, we had that whole discussion about Josh Allen in big games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that I'm tricking myself into putting myself in the same position for like the 20th time with Josh Allen. So
well, remember, I still think Buffalo's going to find a way to make the playoffs. Remember, I said that last week.
They need a win this week to make that happen. Like that's a must.
Well, I think they need to go 4-1 down the stretch. So yeah, so if they don't win this week, yeah, I think they have to run the table. It's that type of game. They can compete with anybody. You're right. I mean, they fall short at the end a little bit, but they'll definitely hang around. 1.5 though, you're basically just picking a money line.
Yeah, more or less.
I would recommend that to bettors out there, where if you're dealing with just like a 1-point spread or something like that, don't beat around the bush. Just take the money line here. Don't worry about like a missed extra point or something like that here or there.
So you would lean Buffalo money line?
Okay, actually, I should clarify that. When you have the underdog and you have a chance to take like a point or 1.5, I would take Buffalo just in case there is a mixed extra point. Like you want it to be in their favor. I was saying that like if you're a Chiefs better this weekend, don't bother taking -1.5. Just take the money line.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Last game. This one's gonna again have game of the year potential. Eagles Cowboys. We saw a classic the first time these two teams met up. Dallas is playing at home where they're undefeated this season, and they're favored by 3.5 points. 3.5. I feel like Dallas wins. 3.5 is a little much. I don't feel quite as strongly about this line as I would have like last week, because I was really high on the Eagles to cover that spread against the Niners, and they definitely did not. Maybe they bounce back and they have a big win here against a divisional rival, but I think with the gut punch of last week, maybe bleeds a little bit into this week as well, and the Cowboys cover this game.
You know what? I actually I look at the result from last week with Philadelphia and I draw a little bit of a different conclusion. First of all, I don't know if I really touched on this or emphasized this when we talked about the Eagles-Niners game, but I think that game told us more about just how good San Francisco was than like it should. That game, even though it was a blowout, shouldn't knock down our opinion of Philly. So that's how I look at that. And I think that you're going to catch an Eagles team this week that's going to be mean, hungry, and pissed off. And I don't think that that's a good spot for Dallas to catch them in. The fact that you're getting the half number in your favor with Philadelphia here really pushes me to take the Eagles, even on the road here. I like when you get the half number in your favor on a significant number, like a 3 or a 7 or something like that in football. That's always something to look for. I will take the Eagles plus 3.5 to be safe in this one. Although I do think that they can win this game outright. I think that they're going to come in royally pissed off against Dallas here.
Okay. I'm excited for that game. I'm excited for that. By the way, our gentleman's agreement from last week went my way. I did remember.
I thought you were going to bring it up during the college segment and we got by it. I'm like, I'm off the hook here.
No, I didn't forget. I just forgot earlier. I'll Venmo request you later. Don't worry about it.
Go ahead, Patrick. You earned it. Hell of a job the Huskies. They certainly played Oregon in that one. I was wrong. You were right. Don't get used to me saying that, but that was the case.
Do you want to have a chance to get your money back with either of the games we just mentioned?
Sure. Do I get to pick or do you get to pick because you won the last one?
I'll pick this one.
Okay. All right. I think that that's fair since you won our previous wager.
So I will give you an opportunity to get the money back in this game. With the I'm going to go you know what? Screw it. Let's go with this Philly Dallas game. Yeah, I know, because I think that's the game you would pick. I'll go with it too, because I feel pretty confident Dallas is going to win and that they'll cover. So I'll take Dallas 3.5, and you're taking the other side.
Yep, I'll take Philly plus 3.5. Fair enough. Handshake over.
Handshake.
There we go. Here.
All right, gentleman's agreement. Perfect.
I can't go 0-2, man. I gotta win this one. Go Birds.
You got to. Real quick, some MVP odds. We teased a little bit earlier. Dak and Purdy both at plus 300 even. It's crazy that they are like identical odds, actually, like literally identical odds. That's pretty crazy. Hurts behind at plus 350. Mahomes at plus 650 surprises me that he's at 4th. Like Tua is behind him at plus 950. Lamar is plus 950. Stroud isn't even in the top like 8. I think Hill was 7th and McCaffrey was 8th, if I'm not mistaken, but those guys are both over plus 1,000 odds too. The offensive player of the year odds, Tyreek is favored at minus 200 and CMC is plus 170. So if you're looking to bait those players, that's kind of the award to do it with, not the MVP. It really just depends on, I mean, if Tyreek keeps doing what he's doing and he stays healthy, he'll win that. But on the MVP side of things, I mean, you're essentially betting on which team between the Niners and Cowboys does better down the stretch, right? That's what the award is now. It's the quarterback of the team that does the best or whatever.
You would think, basically, it's not quite as simple as like, well, if the Cowboys go further, Dak will win it, or if the Niners go further, Purdy will win it. I think that there's an understanding among the industry here that Purdy's got a little bit more to work with than Dak does. Not that Dak like doesn't have talent around him. CeeDee Lamb's a great receiver. But like let's say Dallas gets to the divisional round and loses, and the Niners get to like the NFC Championship round and lose there, and Dallas is like only a round back of where San Fran got. I think that would bode well for Dak, like in that situation. I think it would be a situation where like if the Niners got all the way to the Super Bowl and the Cowboys went out early, like that's where I think you might be able to push it over the edge to Purdy. I think Dak should be a little bit of a favorite over Brock for the reasons we've talked about already. So I don't think it's as clear cut as just which team goes further, but that will play somewhat of a factor.
Yeah, interesting lines there. I'm on the same page as you there.
I also don't think that I think Christian McCaffrey for MVP is not worth the bet. I don't think that Tyreek for MVP is a crazy bet. I think we threw that out there a few weeks back. It's big odds and unlikely to happen just because it is a quarterback award. But I don't think sprinkling a couple dollars here or there is a bad play. He's going to go over 2,000 yards, man.
If he breaks the record, he will almost undoubtedly be in that top 3 to 4. But I think he would have to like absolutely smash the record and then also come close to breaking the touchdowns record too or something. Like he would have to do some, he would also, the Dolphins would have to get the 1 seed. He would have to break the record. And then he would have to come close to, he would have to have like a 4 touchdown game or something like that too, I think.
I wouldn't put it past him.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either.
No one can cover him, man. I mean, nobody can cover him. I'd be interested to see, like, if you poll Dolphins fans out there,
he's more valuable to that team than Tua is. And
well, that's what I was going to get at. Like,
yeah,
if you said, all right, you have to be without one of those 2 guys the rest of the season, I think that they're saying, all right, well, like, you know, we'll take Mike White in at quarterback over Tua, keep Tyreek.
Yeah, because that way you have all the weapons.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you don't have anybody to throw it to them, it's like, I don't know. It's just a discussion about how valuable the quarterback position is and whether or not you think Tyreek could have that success with like a league average quarterback, I think. Because if you don't think that,
I think he can. I think he's quarterback proof. I think he was having success still last year with Skylar Thompson.
He was, yeah.
You know, I don't think his numbers popped off. His numbers definitely didn't pop off the charts like they are this year when Thompson was in there, and I think Teddy Bridgewater made a couple spot starts for them too. But
he did.
He was still putting up good numbers, man. You know.
Yeah. No, you're right.
He makes. Here's my final point on that. He increases Tua's level of play to a greater amount and magnitude than Tua increases Tyreek's level of play, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Like like Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill in this offense he might be on pace for like 2,500 yards.
And Tua, if you look, like what's his yardage output this year? I gotta look that
He's up there. He's I know he's
among the league.
He's third in the league right now. He's third. So Stroud is first, Howell is second, and then Tua is third. And Tua's like 80 yards behind Stroud, basically.
Yeah. So Tua's got like 3,400 some yards right now. Like, I definitely think that Tyreek is generating somewhere. I'll throw out a number. I would say like close to like at least 800 yards more of passing yards output for Tua's total stats this year than like an average number 1 receiver or something, like at least like 800 yards more.
He has more. He has more receiving yards than like 6 teams do as a whole. I think it's 5 teams, but that's ridiculous. At this point in the season, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Moving on to some fantasy stuff. Special player,
indeed.
Jinx. Moving on to some fantasy stuff. Man, the best time of the year. If you're looking back at some draft decisions you made, you're either feeling great or feeling terrible about them. You're either in playoff position or you're not. Some leagues are beginning their playoffs this week. Ours is. I made it. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna edit that out. The fantasy awards that we're going to be giving out this week. I'm just going to go one at a time here. So the fantasy awards we're giving out this week, you know them, you love them at this point. We're going to start with our Put Me in Coach award. This highlights some players that most fantasy players did not have in their lineups for one reason or another. Highlighting some lesser known guys or some guys that you might want to add for next week's games. Geno Smith is going to be our first mention here with 31.6 fantasy points. He's rostered in just over half of leagues per ESPN fantasy, and he's only started in just over 15% of leagues. So if you had Geno Smith in your lineup this past week, certainly if you paired him up with DK Metcalf, you had one hell of a weekend. But credit to Geno, man, and fantasy managers might think twice maybe about leaving him on their bench going forward.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not too surprised that it wasn't like a unanimous start with him or start percentage with him across leagues with some of the struggles that we've seen him have throughout the course of the year. But let's keep in mind this was a 30-plus touchdown guy last year. We saw a little bit of a glimpse of that in that game against Dallas. We'll see if he can replicate that or do something pretty close to it for the remaining weeks in the fantasy season, as a lot of leagues are in the fantasy playoffs or just about.
Honorable mention for the quarterback position. We talked about him earlier in the podcast, Mr. Matthew Stafford. Last week had 22.96 points in standard leagues, rostered in a third of ESPN's leagues, and he's only started in 11.5% of leagues. Had a pretty good outing last time. You think that if the Rams are going to keep having success down the stretch here, they're going to have to rely on that passing offense. The Rams have a very aggressive passing offense. They like to throw it, like to sling the rock. Stafford has been quoted as saying such. So if you're short a quarterback, which a decent amount of you could be at this point in the year, and you haven't looked at Stafford yet, definitely do so. Moving on to the flex position. Chuba Hubbard, back-to-back weeks, getting this award. Shout out to Chuba, man. The pride of Charlotte right now. 25.4 points. He's rostered in 58.9% of leagues, which went up a little bit. And he was only started in 31.8% of leagues last week. He had 25.4 points. I think for running backs, that was like the third or fourth most, if I'm not mistaken. It was definitely up there.
Yeah, man. Now this is this the second week in a row he's won this award? I know he won an award last week for us as well.
Second week in a row, fifth highest score amongst running backs last week, actually.
And Tampa Bay is a pretty good rush defense as well. So credit to him. He seems to have pretty much taken that rollover from Miles Sanders, younger back. Don't have too much else to say other than the fact that hopefully he's a shot in the arm for anybody who's held on to him throughout the year, stashed him, done whatever they needed to in a year or season now where we thought maybe Adam Thielen was the one guy that you could have with confidence in the Carolina offense and that you could start on your fantasy rosters. That clearly has not been the case over the past couple of weeks. Chuba stepped up and said, hey, I can be this one guy, this one reason that you NFL fans out there can watch Carolina Panthers games. Good for Hubbard.
Our other flex position for the Put Me in Coach award is going to be none other than Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts. 19.5 points last week in our league. He's rostered in 2.4% of leagues, and he started in less than 1% of leagues. So if you, for whatever reason, started Alec Pierce in your fantasy league last year, 1, I am not envious of your wide receiver room. 2, fantastic play, my friend. Fantastic play. It worked out for you last week.
Yeah, I bet the large majority of those people are just so injured that they had no other choice.
And probably,
or it's a super deep league, like you start 3 receivers or something crazy like that.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. Our discount double check award, we're going to stick with the Colts, but we're going to highlight a different receiver here. Gardner Minshew and Michael Pittman. They've been a steady and reliable connection most of the year, and not one that I think most fantasy managers would look to right away, which is why I picked them for this award. I could have picked Pierce, but with Pierce being in so few lineups, I felt like it was unlikely that people actually stacked him with Minshew. So Pittman now, he's got 5 straight games with 8 or more catches. That's certainly going to lead to points, especially if you have Minshew in your lineup as well. You're kind of relying a little bit on home run balls and touchdowns with Minshew, which unsettles me slightly, but Pittman is one of the more reliable pass catchers in the league. He's going to generate the highest target share on that team week after week. There's no doubt about it, pretty much regardless of who they play. 44.68 combined points between that duo last week. That's our first discount double check award winner.
Yeah, big thing with Michael Pittman is one of the points that you said at the end there is the targets. His targets in his last 3 games, 12, 13, 16. Even if you go back to week 8, he had 13 there. So 4 of the past 5 weeks that he's played in, he has had double-digit targets. That's massive for a receiver. I think that is one of the most important stats to look at for a fantasy manager that not everybody considers right off the bat. I mean, how much is the quarterback looking your way? Minshew loves throwing to Pittman, like you said, wide receiver 12 in our league. So if you're in a 12-man league, he's a wide receiver 1, which definitely not the first name you would think of when you list the wide receiver 1s in fantasy this year. Great year for him. He's about to go over 1,000 yards as well. Good call there on the discount double stack.
Our other discount double stack award winner, paying homage to the man that this award is named after. We're staying in Green Bay for this. Jordan Love and Christian Watson. I believe we gave this to Love and Jaden Reed at one point this year. So for it to fall into Jordan Love's lap again, if he keeps doing this, we might have to leave him out of the discount double stack award running. But 47.78 combined points and win against the Chiefs last week. Watson is starting to generate some more plays in fantasy leagues. So is Love. And I think that's a situation where you can't necessarily rely on Love and whoever the receiver is because he likes to spread the ball around. And it seems like each week it's a different receiver that gets highlighted. But Watson might be a slight favorite target of his. It's just not by much. Nevertheless, though, congrats to our discount double stack award winner, Jordan Love, Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, I think Jordan Love's definitely capable of getting multiple guys involved, like you said, but I think Watson is the favorite target. I thought, like I said earlier, Watson emerged as the favorite target of Aaron Rodgers last year. He's dealt with some injuries this year. I'm really interested to see where Watson is going to fall in next year's fantasy drafts if he continues to stack up these solid performances through the rest of the course of this year. I mean, also considering the fact of how much better Jordan Love has gotten throughout the year, it's an interesting thing I'm going to start thinking about already since most of my fantasy teams are eliminated. But it'll be interesting to see where draft boards will have Watson fall. He's really come on strong the last couple of weeks. I don't think it's a coincidence that Love is playing better with Watson back and healthy in that Green Bay lineup.
Moving on to our next award. Personally, one of my favorites. This is the Elvis Impersonator Award. Jake Browning, Mr. Joe Burrow, filling in for Joe Cool himself this week and doing his best impersonation of the All-Pro quarterback. 28.16 fantasy points in a win against the Jaguars in overtime. Lot of passes in this game. They were really trying to emphasize Browning's success, and he had success. So credit to Browning. Will we continue to see him succeed in that offense going forward? Who knows? Time will tell. But I think it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to give a bit of credit to Zach Taylor, coach of the Cincinnati Bengals here, for being content and letting Browning open it up, throwing the ball over 30 times, and just kind of letting him go out there and sling it as well. I don't think that fact should be ignored. They had a
confidence
game plan drawn up. Yeah, they had a pretty good game plan drawn up. I mean, Jacksonville's been exploited in the pass game this year, and they clearly weren't afraid to kind of let Browning cook. This is a great one, man, because he really did do a Joe Burrow impression here with his stat line. how good he looked. And I know Wade Biltoff in our fantasy football league is going to be relying on Jake Browning in his fantasy football playoff matchup against Brandon Hertfeld over on the Club Garnet side this week. So monumental day for Jake Browning as he gets his first ever playoff fantasy football start. So way to look for the Elvis Presley impersonations to continue in the next week. Good call here on your part. Really good call.
I thought about it. I thought about picking him up as well. I'll be honest, but
it's a really good call for the award too, just because like it was a stat line that Burrow would have, and Browning, this came out of nowhere too. So this is a great impersonation award. I don't know, man. I don't know if it'll continue week in and week out, but it's fun right now while it lasts. I know that a lot of people are going to be buying into the Jake Browning hype.
If he keeps it up, you might see exhibits in Vegas where Jake Browning is pretending to be Joe Burrow.
Might see him in Cincinnati too.
Yeah, you never know. Next up, we're gonna have a little bit of a mood switch. This is not quite of an ideal award to win if you're a fantasy player, or an NFL player for that matter. It means you had a rough week. First of all, I'm gonna highlight a guy who's been burning managers all year. It's Austin Eckler. This was a guy who, if you drafted him this year, you probably drafted him in the first rounds, more likely, maybe the second round if he slipped a little bit. But he had 12 and a half, more than 12 and a half points less than his expected total for the previous week against the lowly Patriots. The Patriots have been pretty good at stopping the run all year, but for the Chargers to not even get a touchdown and for Eckler to have the day that he did, at 3.7 points in that game, he had 18 yards on 14 carries and 2 receptions for 9 yards. That's a pretty abysmal day against one of the league's worst teams when you're really counting on him to be the guy that you drafted early in the season.
Yeah, big thing here for the Chargers. Kellen Moore has been the offensive coordinator. Kind of new philosophy. Joe Brady left from the year before, so they don't throw to the running backs as much this year. I think that was a huge part of Eckler's points and his reasons for success in past years, and obviously dealt with some injury concerns earlier in the year as well. I think it's all kind of compiled onto what has been a very, very subpar season for where fantasy managers drafted him. Tough matchup this week, but that's no excuse. Eckler's supposed to be a blue blood, no doubter, perform every time you put him in the lineup, and he probably let a lot of fantasy managers down this week who needed him to get a win for a playoff push. So that's tough. It's a bad spot to let your team down.
Well, at least he had some points, because our next guy didn't have any. Terry McLaurin, I'm looking at you. 0 points. None. Goose egg. Just like nothing. Not a catch, not a yard, not a carry, not a touch. He got paid. He was in the game. Like, he played. But he had 3 targets, no catches against the Miami defense. Jalen Ramsey probably just locked him up. If I had to go back and look at the tape, I would guess going into it that's what happened. But you can't, as a flex player, you can't really do worse than no points unless you do something catastrophic on the field. So he's our winner for the You Let the Whole Team Down award. Congratulations, Terry McLaurin. You're this week's lovable loser.
Dude, I mean, he's had a subpar year, and there are still, like, the Washington offense is still throwing the ball a ton. So
Howell is second in the league in passing yards. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how is a stat like this happening? Like, I'm pretty sure Curtis Samuel went off in this game too. Like, he's had a couple good weeks in a row randomly. I don't know. I've always felt for Terry McLaurin because he's never been in a great situation, but yeah, he's not among the elite receivers, and he's burned fantasy managers here. I'm interested to see how far he's going to fall on draft boards for next year, because I think there's been a couple subpar years in a row.
I actually think he's a very viable trade target for the Commanders in the offseason. I totally see them flipping him for somebody unless they like totally revamp their roster. in the
You get
offseason.
another NFL team to like buy into the fact like, hey, this is a really talented guy. He's just never had a ton
Right.
around him, never had like a stud quarterback.
Exactly.
Put him in Kansas City. That'd be an interesting one. He'd perform in Kansas City probably.
That'd be interesting. Bring him to New England. Pat's need a receiver.
Oh, that'd be the death of his career.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right.
Oh, you're so beaten down, Patrick. It's funny, but like at the same time, I feel for you.
I'm hoping that we lose every week, and we do, and it still continues to disappoint me. You understand how bad you have to be as an NFL team to expect and hope for your team to lose, and they still let you down in the process of accomplishing those things.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you can root against your team to win because you know it's going to be good in the long haul for draft picks. But like at the end of the day, you only get to watch your team play once a week, and it still sucks to go out and see them suck for 60 minutes. I get it. Believe me, I do.
My hot take is that if Belichick pulls it off and the Pats get the number 1 pick, he should be coach of the year. That's my hot take.
Well, that is quite steaming hot.
Because, hey, man, some of the games he's managed to lose, the masterclass at the end of that game against the Giants was like unbeatable. You can't top that. He's pulling the strings, man.
You think he told your kicker to pull it left?
Yes. No, what he did was he traded one of the most efficient, or he released one of the most efficient kickers in football over the last couple of years in Nick Folk, and then drafted statistically the worst kicker in the NFL this year with a 4th-round pick to take his place.
Well, I thought with Folk, it was like a mutual, like Folk just wanted to be a little bit closer to his family. I think he had family in the Tennessee area, and there was like kind of a mutual understanding like that, hey, you can go do that. And
a mutual understanding that this team was going to suck. And Belichick felt too good about Nick Folk as a person to have him stick around for it. He said, go to this other team, go to my buddy Mike Brable, help him win a few football games because we're not going to win any this year. That's what happened.
That's been a good fantasy kicker over the past couple of years.
He has, man. I
think he was a kicker 1 like a year or 2 ago. I think it was 2 years ago. I think he was the kicker 1.
Wouldn't surprise me. Anyways, our last award for fantasy football. It's the MVP of the week, man. We had a few guys in the running for this. Kyren Williams had a really great week. He's an honorable mention here. He was over 30 points, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. We also had Kyren Williams was not over 30 points. My apologies. Derrick Henry was up there, though. We did have Tyreek Hill in that 30-plus point mark as an honorable mention, but he missed the cut. Deebo Samuel is going to be our first name mentioned here with 35.8 fantasy points, more than 21 points over his expected total for the week. Had a hell of a game in that crucial win against Philly. But DK Metcalf is going to take home the MVP of the week honors. 36.4 fantasy points last week. He was only projected to have about 12. He was plus 23.2 over expected, which was the highest point total over expected of the week. So that's why he gets the award. Congrats, DK Metcalf. I'm sure he's saying something to us right now, but we can't hear him because it's in sign language. Congrats, DK. You're this week's MVP in fantasy football.
Well earned, well deserved. Probably got a lot of fantasy teams out to a rocking start, going on Thursday, got them feeling good right off the bat. I'm sure that energy permeated to the rest of his fantasy teammates out there. This is a very, very deserving award to him, especially because he was making a lot of the plays and run after catch. And after that first touchdown, he took that slant basically to the house. Dude, he's so good, man. It's a lot of fun to watch DK play, and a lot of weapons in that Seattle offense, especially receiving. When they drafted Smith and Jigba, I think that there was a lot of concern for him and Lockett about how things would be divvied up, who would be the dominant guy. There's no doubt who the number 1 is in Seattle. While they do have a lot of weapons to throw the ball to, it is DK Metcalf, the top dog there.
DK. I would
not.
That's
his name. That's what DK stands for.
I would not have put my money on that. Nice call.
Yep.
Some last fantasy football things that we'll touch on. Has there been a bigger disappointment in the league this year than Austin Eckler in terms of fantasy output? Like, there were some other guys that were kind of hyped up. I don't feel like Kelsey we can really put into this conversation because he's still like a top 5 tight end, I think, and he's still like performing pretty well. Garrett Wilson, it's not all his fault. A lot of that has to do with Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yeah. If there's a guy that comes to mind, if we're talking like first round picks exclusively, like I think Cooper Kupp's probably in that discussion for as disappointing or maybe even more so disappointing than Eckler, just because, yes, he's dealt with some injuries this year, but him and Stafford, haven't always been on the same page. And,
it's like when he has played,
like
he
you said,
hasn't been great.
yeah, and like he might be still trying to play through some injury and everything like that. You alluded to it earlier. If the one difference I guess you could say with Cooper Kupp though, and it all depends on when you drafted, because remember that hamstring got re-aggravated right around draft season, and then that put him on the IR to kick things off. The one thing with Cooper Kupp is like you knew that the injury thing was a little bit of a concern coming in, so that was a calculated risk you had to take. Austin Eckler, it's just been disappointing. I mean, he did deal with injury himself, but even when he's been back, the output just hasn't been there. And I don't know. Those are two guys that you were probably taking in the first round that just, has really probably caused your fantasy season to backfire. There's an old saying in fantasy that I don't know how old it is, but it's a saying I go by, where you can't win your draft in the first round, but you can lose it. Where if you draft a guy like an Eckler or a Kupp this year, and you just kind of screw yourself because now you passed on your first opportunity to get a real stud player, and neither of those guys turned out to be one this year. You just put yourself in a tough hole. Those are the two guys I think that most fantasy managers are really, really disappointed with for this year, first round wise at least.
You could also throw Bijan in there, probably. I stayed away from him purposefully around draft season in all my leagues because I feel like the rookie running backs that everybody hypes up almost never work out the way people expect them to. So at this point, I've just learned to stay away from them. Like, I feel like every year there's some exciting rookie running back that comes in that will make some big plays during the year and have some good games, but the rookies are very rarely the bell cow of an offense, even if they are obviously the best guy in the running back room. For whatever reason, it just seems like because of the nature of short careers of running backs, NFL coaches like to kind of phase them in a little bit in the early parts of their career. I'm sure there's a few guys you could look at as exceptions to that, but that's why I stayed away from Bijan. I'm sure there will be another running back next year that's some hyped up first round pick that people will hype up, and I'll stay away from that guy too.
Yeah, Bijan's starting to come on here in recent weeks. I think things been much better. His snap share and his carry share has been a little bit better. But yeah, he hasn't justified his first round pick. With Bijan, I completely agree with what you were saying about the rookie running back thing. They for some reason they just don't completely get thrust into full duty right away. There's only really two guys that come to mind that have been exceptions to that rule. Like you said, Zeke was, and Saquon both had really good rookie years where they just kind of got the full workload. But other than that, like we're seeing Jahmyr Gibbs, like we talked about, struggle to get a full workload. And, Bijan's been battling with Tyler Algier for some reason throughout the course of this year. With Robinson, it's a classic drafting a guy at his ceiling, which is always a risky play in fantasy. Like if you're going to take him in the first round, that you are drafting him for what his absolute best scenario could be, given the fact that Atlanta's not a super explosive offense. And, the fact that he was dealing with some other competition in the backfield. It's a huge risk when you draft like that. Just like if you draft him there in that spot, everything needs to go right for him to justify being taken in that like late first round level or tier, like when he was typically going. around draft season. It's risky business.
Our last fantasy topic that we're going to hit, we actually have a listener submitted fantasy play. They're looking for some advice here. So, Kamish, I'm going to open this up to you. I'm going to put some input in here as well. They're looking at 3 different running backs here in a non-PPR league. They need to start 2 of them. The running backs are Keaton Mitchell, Jaylen Warren, and Devin Singletary.
Okay. Keaton Mitchell, I would definitely have in the lineup. I think that his snap share has increased significantly in the past couple of weeks. I know they were on bye last week. I don't really see either of these guys, like touchdowns are the huge thing in this one. I don't see either of these guys as like huge touchdown guys.
Well, if Najee is out this week, then Warren's going to be getting like 80% of the touches, right?
Right. Okay. So we should stipulate that, yes, if Najee's out, Jaylen Warren should definitely be the play. But if Najee is still in and it's the normal breakdown, Najee's going to get the goal line carries here. And I just don't think the fact that you said it's non-PPR, right? So that hurts some of
that like doesn't help Jaylen.
Yeah, that doesn't help Warren, who does a lot of good work in the passing game as well. Coupled with the fact that New England is a tough defense and that this is going to be a super low scoring game. Who does Houston play this week? Can you remind me?
Houston this week plays. Who does Houston play? Houston plays the Jets. So an equally tough matchup for running back there, I would say.
Yeah, but the Jets are much better defense against the pass. They're a better pass defense. More teams have to run. I'm going to lean slightly to, I'm going to say definitely get Keaton Mitchell in the lineup. I think that that's your best chance for a boom as well, just with how explosive he is on the ground. And the Ravens have the best rushing offense of the running backs that you mentioned. And then if Najee's not playing, or not, if Najee is playing, given that this is not a PPR league, I'd give Singletary a slight edge. That hurts saying that because Jaylen Warren's my guy. What do you think?
I think I think Warren would probably be in either way for me, to be honest, even if Najee's healthy, because I feel like with the quarterback situation the Steelers could be working with, they might have more opportunities for like screen passes or little flares or something like that for Warren to get involved in the game. Even if it's a non-PPR league, that's still like a half point per catch.
Yards. Yeah.
Yeah. And those receiving yards. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're just getting the receiving yard points. Yeah.
But those can add up. And I would say he's a more versatile back. So that's why I would have him in there. And I would bet that Najee's touches go down slightly with this being a short week and him being on the injury report today as of Wednesday. So I would say that's a pretty safe play. Keaton Mitchell, I am not quite as high on, only because I feel like week to week with the Ravens, it's like a revolving door of who's going to get the ball in certain situations. And their running backs are really touchdown dependent for the most part. Mitchell's been the one that actually isn't. I mean, he's had a couple of touchdowns, but he's been like a spark plug, big play kind of guy that they bring in every once in a while. Last week, the last game that they had a bye week last week. The last game that they had, Edwards hardly got the ball at all, and Mitchell did quite a bit, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, against the Chargers,
that would be. It's really just a matter of if you feel like that trend will continue or not, because Singletary has had some big games for the Texans. He had a couple at least earlier in the month, whereas the last couple of games he's had have not been so great. So I would say probably lean more towards the Jets, I think, or towards Singletary. I think there's a higher likelihood that the Ravens will be needing to pass the ball and try to put up points to match the Rams versus I think it's just as likely that the Ravens are trying to match the Rams shot for shot with the passing game than it is that the Texans go up on the Jets and they're just trying to run the clock out. And they're feeding Singletary for like a full quarter or something. So I would go Singletary and Warren is who I would go with.
Okay, and I would go Singletary and Mitchell with the stipulation that if Najee is out or news comes out that he's limited, I would flip that to Mitchell and Warren. So interesting. We'll see. So we both have Singletary as of right now.
Yeah.
And
then no faith in your Steelers, man. No faith.
This is not a game I think that you want to have fantasy players in. Like I think Warren
no, it's not.
Could get there on Warren could get there on volume, but with this not being a PPR league, I think that hurts as well, like I said. And it's just like what's the best what's the best you could be hoping for Warren, in my opinion, like 8 to 10 points? Because I don't think he's going to find the end zone personally.
You would have to hope that he has like a couple of big plays in the passing game and then maybe gets in the end zone, or that Najee is hurt.
Or maybe like breaks a pitch like he did against Cleveland. I just think that like a boom potential is way more likely with Mitchell. But
I think
better offense I
think Warren is the kind of back that has hurt the Patriots more this year, whereas Najee is like, the Patriots are tough to beat when you're just grounding and pounding it. Like Warren has that extra element in his game that the Pats struggle with sometimes. So I think he's a good player either way this week, legitimately. Especially with I do love the guy. Our offense is not in a good spot. So hey, this is your opportunity to make up for it. You might only need 7 points to win, or like 4 or less. Really just 1, I guess. But hey.
How about a 2-0 final? First one to a safety.
Some other news that's dropped since we started recording. In the baseball world, Juan Soto has been traded to the Yankees officially.
Really?
Yeah, officially. Trent Grisham, couple prospects in that package. So Trent Grisham and Soto are going to the Yankees. It looks like the Yankees are sending back Michael King, and then some other prospects as well. But yeah, man, they're going to have Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and Giancarlo Stanton all in the same lineup. 3 guys who at the end of their careers could very well all have like just insane stats. Those are 3 guys that could have like 550 plus homers. Like that's pretty unreal.
Yeah, oh man. Being a fan of a small market ball club, and then I see what a Yankee like middle of the order looks like. It's like, how can you compete with that?
Yeah.
They're getting antsy in New York. I mean, it's been since 2009 since they won a World Series, and it didn't even make the playoffs last year. So like it's panic in the streets there. World Series or bust for them with this move?
It kind of feels like it, because I don't think Soto's
right?
I don't think Soto will stay there after this year. He's got a 1-year deal. He's probably going to test the open market next year, and I don't think he'll stay there. So I really think this is like them putting all their chips in for this season. Legitimately, that's what it feels like.
I would have to think that New York would at least go after him, though. Tenure and offer.
Yeah, he will. I just don't think they will. I just don't think he'll stay.
We'll see. Trent Grisham's not that bad of a player either. Nice little throw in there as well for some depth.
Yeah, he will be. He'll be a guy that they can have out there in defensive situations, and is sort of like, I would assume they use him as like a light version of Verdugo, sort of. He's a little bit better defensively. Verdugo had some great defensive stats last year. But yeah, that for me now, you see my beanie. This is actually a recruiting pitch for Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shohei Ohtani. Come to Boston, boys. Come to Boston. You want to face the best hitters? You got the chance right now. Let's go, baby. Come on. Oh. All right.
Pittsburgh's a very easy town to play in. The fans are laid back, easy going. I think Pittsburgh would be a nice place to come play. We have the best backdrop in all of baseball. We've got the river out in right field.
Our stadium is pretty. Come play for us.
Hey, dude, the Pirates made a move, no one talking about yesterday. We traded for Marco Gonzalez,
who was a 2-time salary dump.
Dude, Marco Gonzalez. All right, like
He'll
I
be your
can't.
like third best. He'll be one
He'll
of your
be
better
well,
pitchers.
yeah. And our rotation's beat up, but he's going to be like our number 3, number 4.
Hey, shout out Colin Holderman, man. That's Columbia Firefly legend, Pittsburgh Pirate. Shout out Colin Holderman.
Colin, if you're listening, we need you on the show, man.
Yeah, actually, I should reach out to him. I should reach out. He's a guy that might do something like that. We'll see. Um, any other news notes? Anything else you want to hit on?
No, man, we touched on it pretty comprehensively today. I do want to have one note out there to our bettors. We've talked a lot about gambling during the podcast here. I do not have a best bet, especially with college football winding down. But I do want to make one note out there to people that are going to be betting on bowl games that are upcoming during this bowl season, whether it be again college football playoffs or just your random Duke's Mayo Bowl. I implore you to do research about who is opting out of playing in these games. As we get to this point in the season, with this being the final game for some guys declaring for the NFL draft, there are going to be a lot of guys that are going to opt out of the game. Transfer portal, guys that are transferring are going to opt out as well, or they're just not going to be on the team anymore. Do your research. Don't just look at a line and place a bet. See who's actually playing in the game for the respective teams. That's all I want to say. I think that's important to consider this time of the year for college football bowl season.
I'm absolutely shocked the Pats Steelers under was not your best bet of the week. 30.5. There's no way those teams combined to score more than 30 points. There's no way.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
There's no way.
Let's throw that one in there. I'd be remiss if I didn't throw it. Take an alternate total, dude. I don't think they get to 20.
I'm looking at the Patriots under over this year. I'm trying to find that.
They say it's not a sexy play to take an under, but you know what? Unders hit, man. Public loves overs. Everybody goes for the over. Unders are where the money's made. Just ask Iowa football.
Hold on. Give me 1 sec. Where is this? Odds and betting lines. 2 and 9 against the spread.
Segment is brought to you by the Fifth and Long podcast. Just trying to pass the time here with Paul Kashack and Patrick DeMarre.
Yeah, right. What was okay, so 37.5 under hits. Okay. Oh, I see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh my gosh. The over in Pats games this year, regular season only, or the under is
regular season so far.
You're right. Well, for whatever reason, you can see the preseason games on here. I don't know why anyone
I gotcha.
would bet on preseason games. That sounds like a terrible idea.
Oh, people bet on preseason games. I do not.
That's gambling addiction. That's gambling addiction. If you do that, that's just dumb.
Well, that's a thing too, where like if you do your research, like and you know who's actually playing, like what starters are playing there can play a factor. But like then everybody gets taken out like a quarter or two in. So I get what you're saying.
You don't know. That's so dumb. That's like betting on like the I don't know, Azerbaijan soccer league or something. Like you don't know what's really gonna happen.
Why, you got a lock over in that soccer league?
No, I don't, dude. I don't. No, but since the start of the regular season, the under in Patriots games is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 3. Bet the under. It's the lowest over-under total in NFL history. 30.5. Bet the under. We did this with Iowa. I'm riding it now, man. You did it with the Hawkeyes. I'm doing it with my Patriots. We suck. We can't score points. The end zone is just as foreign to us as anything that's foreign, man. Bet the under in Patriots games. You'll make money.
Yeah, and do it like soon, because I bet this is gonna be one of the rare situations where the public's actually on the under because they know how bad these teams are, and I think that line will keep dropping. I think it's already dropped like a point or two since it came out. I think it opened around 32, and now it's like at 30. So get it soon. If
you want to put in a sizable amount for the both of us, I will ride that with you. Just let me know.
We'll talk tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow.
We'll talk. We'll talk.
Mhm.
I don't think either of us are going to enjoy watching that game, but we're both going to be watching it.
No, I hate that I have to watch it, but
oh God, Paul, I'm going to be so sad tomorrow. But if I don't even want to entertain the possibility of my team winning, knock on wood, because if somehow they pull it off, I might have to make sure you're okay.
if they lose tomorrow,
You'll be at the Steelers office calling for Tomlin's head.
well, you know what? If they lose tomorrow, we've already talked enough about the Tomlin thing. But if they lose tomorrow, then maybe they're actually, yeah, like you said, there would be like an actual understanding that change needs to be made across the board. But we'll deal with that when it comes. I hope they find a way to win.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about Staley in that game. That if the Chargers lost, he wouldn't make the trip back to LA. But they pulled it out.
I think
so
you're probably right.
Good for him.
Right about that.
Yeah, they were very lucky. They got out of there by the skin of their teeth. It's been a juicy podcast. We've covered a lot of stuff. It's a pleasure. I will do my best to represent the Fifth and Long podcast well in the fantasy playoffs going forward. And hopefully when we reconvene next week, I'm still in it. And we can have that maybe to talk about a little bit, as well as some more sports talk also. So,
Patrick, good luck to you. Congratulations on making the playoffs for the first time in league history. Well done. It's been a good season for you. I wish I could be there to join you, but I cannot. It's been a pleasure as always. Yeah, we have talked about a ton of stuff. Hope our listeners enjoy.
Yeah, you guys are lucky. Paul and I don't have any other Wednesday night plans. That's for sure.
Nope. Just talking sports. Just a casual sports nerd out here.
Kamish, man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for hopping on. We'll see you next week. Go Steelers.
Steelers, man. Take it easy to everybody out there.
All right. Have a great night, guys. Thanks for tuning into the Fifth and Long Pod. We'll see you again next week.